Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube. It's like a bonus show here, Sam, because we're here all week. Football season is back, and so we're back previewing every single team. We went through the Norths yesterday. We're on to the AFC and the NFC East today. It's all brought to you by FanDuel. And coming at you from the Mike Vrabel is part of the Bill Belichick Coaching Tree studio.
Indeed, on a Tuesday. Crazy.
On a Tuesday. Yeah, so again, this week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 9 a.m. It's like a training camp extravaganza kickoff week here. We'll go back to 2 shows a week, I believe, next week, and then we're into our season groove of Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 9 a.m. from August through May, all the way through the draft.
Yeah, and we said on yesterday's show, in season, Mondays and Thursdays kind of take care of themselves, the preview, the review show. But Wednesday is very much up for interpretation and tweaking. So send us ideas of what you guys would like to see. We've had some emails come in. We've had some suggestions. But what is our email? Check the mic at the33rd-team.com.
That's correct.
Email us in. Let us know what you'd like to see in those Wednesday shows.
Send in more suggestions. We've already had suggestions about scheme updates, league trends, injuries, and I think we can really make that Wednesday show really good. Of course, the award-winning Shouty shows.
Award-winning, yes.
If anyone's left on Shouty shows, everybody's seen. There's a lot of.
It's true. There's been a lot of casualties to the Shouty shows.
Pretty much since we started Shouty show segments.
Yeah,
just saying.
You could, right.
Anyway,
I'm not going to say we caused that, but it's certainly true that since we've been talking about the Shouty shows, there have been a lot of purges from the Shouty shows.
I'm not proud of that necessarily. I'm just saying. It's ironic. All right,
Stephen A. still out there, though.
He is. We'll take him. No, we'll continue our stuff. All right, here we go.
It's a big white whale.
We got 8 teams to discuss here today. You ready?
Yeah.
We're starting in the AFC East with the Buffalo Bills. The Bills, the way we've characterized the Bills the last few years, being so close, losing in AFC championships, losing heartbreakers, 3-point losses in the playoffs, and we're saying, hold serve, just don't do anything crazy. You don't have to overhaul things. You're so close. It'll happen. A play here, a play there. But they finally made the big move, which was firing Sean McDermott as head coach. Joe Brady takes over. Jim Leonard comes in to take over the defense. The first major move for the Bills. Personnel-wise, some similarities, normal turnover, but going into this season, what are your thoughts on the Bills now under Joe Brady?
Yeah, obviously, big picture, it is a sort of fascinating departure from what they've been doing in the last few years. They finally made that big move. I think they deserve a ton of credit for not having made the move up until that point, for saying, no, look, this isn't something fundamentally wrong with this team, with this roster. We've just been either unlucky or just beaten by another extremely good team at the sharp end of the season in the playoffs, and that can happen, right? It doesn't mean you need to change everything. Like, you can just lose on a random game in the playoffs against a really good team as well. Doesn't mean that if you run it back next year, try again, you wouldn't beat them again. But they decided this is the year, something's got to change, and it's Sean McDermott who's got to go. And so obviously that's a really interesting thing to watch now. Like, is that going to make them better? Sean McDermott was a very good head coach of this team for a number of years, had them consistently contending. Now you've gone a different direction. Can Joe Brady, A, maintain that, B, make it better? And you sort of couple that with the DJ Moore move, the trade that they made, which again sort of answers a significant issue with the team that people have been talking about for a number of years. They've done 2 of those in one offseason. So how are those going to work?
Let's go through that, because the head coach thing, I say this a lot on the show. I don't know how Joe Brady's going to be as a head coach, right? Like, we get asked all the time, or we'll do a radio or podcast appearance. It's like, what do you think? Who are the best head coach candidates? Or, what do you think of this head coaching hire? I'm like,
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know how he's going to be as a leader of men, as a CEO, which is much different than just being a play caller. But I will say, having the continuity on offense of Brady still being there, that's probably a win and a big part of him getting this job. And then, as you said, with the DJ Moore move, they have made, the Bills, a lot of moves at receiver the last few years. And we kept saying, hey, they need that outside X receiver. It felt like they were building the entire plane out of slot receivers, which isn't bad. It's not like this offense has been bad at all, to Brandon Beane's point last year. Hey, it's not like we're not scoring 30 points a game and everything, but I do believe DJ Moore, even though he's probably at the tail end of his career, still capable of winning on the outside, adding, I'd say, more of an intermediate type of threat. His route running runs a good deep out, dig route. He can just add something that this offense doesn't have to go with Khalil Shakir. I thought Dalton Kincaid, if he's healthy, man, I think he might be a top 5, maybe top 3 receiving tight end. I loved his progression last year. Kincaid was outstanding before he got banged up. And then one of my big questions is, this is the first time in a couple years they've had some turnover on the offensive line. And it's just at one spot, David Edwards out at left guard. They've had incredible continuity and health on the offensive line in Buffalo these last few years.
Yeah, they have. And Edwards is a good player, so it's a significant blow to them, but the line, I think, should still be very good based off what they have remaining, and they've got some depth there as well. Look, the pieces are there, I think, for Buffalo to still be a very good team again. I mean, this is the roster overall, the fact that Josh Allen is arguably the best quarterback in the NFL, period, at this point, and the fact that Brady is something of a continuity hire. Weird as that is when you're trying to change something fundamentally to then hire a continuity hire, I think generally it's a good thing to bring in or to elevate the guy who had the offense working well with Josh Allen. I think all that's good. And then I'm kind of honestly almost more excited by the sort of knock-on effect of Jim Leonhard coming in to run the defense. I think you could argue that Sean McDermott's defense, not that it had gotten stale, but that was the thing that was running into problems sometimes in those big games, right? Which is this approach of being something of a bend but don't break defense, and every now and again when you run up against the best, it's like the sort of average players. When an average player runs up against an elite player, he tends to get his ass kicked. When a defense that is designed to bend but don't break runs up against a very, very good opposition, I mean, it's difficult to draw the line in the sand and say, all right, now stop, right? If you're sort of almost designed to give up that kind of buffer, they just score on you. And maybe a pivot to a more aggressive, more diverse defense is actually going to get the best out of the group.
I think there's a lot of two things can be true statements based off the Bills and McDermott. When they did get into the playoffs, I would say, the defense has failed more than, say, Josh Allen. I know we don't like that narrative-wise. It's all Josh Allen's fault. We'll talk about that in a second. But at the same time, injuries were as much to blame. Remember, they went into the AFC Championship in 2024 with like 6 missing defensive starters. In 2023. I think it was their divisional round game against the Chiefs, am I remembering that one correctly? Whenever they lost to the Chiefs in 24, missing 6 defensive starters in 23, and in 24, Christian Benford getting injured on the very first play where they wanted to play more man coverage. So they've had injuries that have affected the defense. But you're right. I think McDermott's defense essentially got a little bit worse come playoff time in some of those big games. And then last year with Denver, in the old two things can be true category, like, yes, if you're a Josh Allen detractor, you could say, well, that turnover before the half against Denver in the big game, and he did throw the interception when the ball was just taken from with Brandon Cooks down the field. But that was not necessarily Josh Allen's fault. Allen had a couple bad turnovers in there, but he's still the driver for this entire offense, right? So we're in a lot of these two things can be true category when it comes to the Bills. They just need to, same thing we've said in every preview for the last 4 years, you just got to make a couple more plays in these big games. And I don't know how you unlock that or uncover that. It's a drop here and there. It's a missed throw here and there. It's a busted coverage here and there. Like, at some point, that's got to come good. I'm with you on the Leonhard thing, though. Like, his history of playing at Wisconsin, playing in the NFL, coordinator at Wisconsin, and then he's been in Denver these last couple of years. And Denver's defense, we know that they've been one of the league's best over the last couple seasons, but they've built that thing from scratch. Vance Joseph as the defensive coordinator and Jim Leonhard being there, working with the secondary assistant head coach, pass game coordinator. It's almost he's been talked about as a high-end defensive coordinator candidate in the NFL for a long time, and this is his big opportunity to make a statement here for the Bills. And I love the way Denver has built their defense and done it with not a ton of star power. Pat Surtain is a star. I think Nick Bonito was a budding star. It's not a knock on Denver, but man, they've done a great job, and I think that's what he's called to do here with Buffalo.
Yeah, and again, just it's one of those ones where we talked about the opposite of this, where with the Browns, where pivoting from Jim Schwartz, to any kind of different defense it's a risk given how successful that had been. It's not that Sean McDermott's defense is bad, but given the sort of ceiling or given the level that they seem to be at in the most critical situations in the playoffs, effectively, I do wonder if shifting just defensive scheme to anything else is a positive for them, just to give them something different in the playoffs.
Personnel-wise, just to go through the offense once again, I think the Bills the last couple of years have shown, other than the outside receiver, I think they have the ability to win in different ways. I think one of the talking points we'll have throughout the season is making sure that you don't the Josh Allen run game piece has always been hopefully break glass in case of emergency, and I still think that's their best bet, where you don't want Allen crushing himself in the run game throughout a 17-game schedule. That's why James Cook's emergence the last couple of years as one of the better running backs in the league, their offensive line continuity. Hopefully for them, DJ Moore as your closest thing to like a real X receiver that you've had in a while gives you just more options, right? They can attack the middle of the field extremely well with Kincaid and Knox at tight end, with Cook out of the backfield, their other backs out of the backfield, with Khalil Shakir. Now DJ Moore becomes that other outside receiver, giving you more ways to win offensively. And I think that's a big part of when we talk about one play here and there. I think that makes this offense more diverse. And then again, the continuity with Joe Brady.
And the other thing is, it's going to be interesting because this offseason, like the story of the offseason has been everybody chasing multiple tight end sets, following the Rams approach. The Bills, though, they're already set for that, right? Not only do they have 3 effectively tight ends between Dawson Knox, Dalton Kincaid, and Jackson Hawes, but they already have a built-in, like one of them is already a hoss when it comes to run blocking, and Jackson Hawes, like he's tailor-made to be that monster blocking tight end. Like they can deploy whatever heavy 13 personnel, multiple tight end formations that anybody pivots towards this season. You could argue they were at their best when they had James Cook running the ball, well last season, as well. So like they're already where everybody's trying to get to from a schematic personnel point of view. I don't know if they were ahead of the curve, they saw it coming, or if they just coincidentally ended up there, but they're already where everybody's been trying to aim towards.
Jackson Hawes already might be a top 2 or 3 run blocking tight end.
Yeah.
Would he have gone in the second round if he was just coming out 1 year later with this tight end run in the draft as a former, 5th rounder? So yeah, I think offense mostly back and feeling pretty good. Defensively, I think this is where we always have some questions, and this is where I do think they've taken a little bit of a hit from a depth perspective. I thought the story for me last year was they brought in Joey Bosa, they brought in a ton of talent on the defensive side of the ball and added a lot of depth on the defensive side. Michael Hoyt, who had to face a suspension right off the bat. They have some depth this year. I think they need a few of the young guys to step up. I thought they got some good play from Deion Walker last year. They're bringing in Bradley Chubb, who's been up and down. He's 2 years removed from his best play, and he's been in and out of the lineup, maybe 3 years removed from his best play. Greg Rousseau, I think, is still a star. Ed Oliver comes back off of injury, but I think this defensive line depth is the story again for Buffalo. They're at their best when they're 7 or 8 deep on the D-line. I think they have the potential there. Second rounder TJ Parker, who had top 10 to 15 hype going into the season. So I think they've got the potential there, but they got to put it all together on the D-line.
Yeah, they do. But
that's where Leonard did a really good job with the 7-8 man rotation that Denver was a part of, or he's a part of a system that did that well.
You're right. Like it's interesting because on the one hand they've got this sort of collection of bodies outside. Gregory Rousseau has been very good. Ed Oliver has been very good, particularly as a pass rusher. Outside of those guys, though, it's a collection of guys that have either underwhelmed or sort of feel like they should be more impactful players than they've been. Is that just who they are, or are they crying out for like a new coach to come in and actually be able to get the best out of those guys? Like it will be interesting to see if the defense overall, but in particular the defensive line, is where Leonard can work his magic.
And then they've had some changes as Matt Milano has gotten older, and they've tried to get younger at the linebacker position. And then you look at what they've done at corner. I thought I don't know if I just put the Bills' moves under the microscope a little bit more than other teams because they are one play away so often. And I thought that last year, like their move to Christian Benford's emergence a couple years ago and trying to play more man coverage, and then drafting Maxwell Hairston in 2025 as a 4-3 corner who could play man, it did feel like they're saying, hey, we want to be able to match up with the Chiefs and their speed and everything. I mean, I think they are equipped with Hairston and Benford to play more man coverage, or at least match up one-on-one on the outside more than they did under Sean McDermott. So I'll be keeping an eye on that. But yeah, there's been some turnover in the back seven, safety and linebacker. C.J. Gardner-Johnson's in there. Geno Stone comes in. I'm interested to see how a lot of these pieces come together for the Bills. I think linebacker might be one of my biggest questions for them. Fourth rounder Caleb Elam's-Orr from TCU comes in. Dorian Williams has done a pretty good job in the run game, never been great in coverage. They have Terrell Bernard, but something to keep an eye on in that linebacker room as well. But I think they're in a decent spot on the D-line and at corner, and I think that can take them a long way.
Yeah, linebacker's a question. I think safety's a bit of a question as well. Cole Bishop, I think, is solid, but this combination of DeMar Hamlin, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Geno Stone, we talked about yesterday with the Bengals, what a disaster he was for them. Like, if he has to see the field, it's probably an issue. So you would at least be a little bit concerned about the other safety spot.
All right, man, what happens this year for Buffalo? We've seen in other sports teams that are consistently good. The Knicks just did this. Teams that are good over a multi-year period, and they say, we need a change at the top. New head coach, and the Knicks go new head coach, they win an NBA title. Recency bias right there. We saw Marty Schottenheimer fired after a 14-win season in which the Chargers lost in the first round in 2006, or in the divisional round. So this has happened. Sure, there's a million others that people can think of. I think a lot of times when those moves happen, there's either, hey, half the people say, oh, it was time to go. Of course it was time for a change. Sean McDermott can't win the big one. And then other people look back, and you've done this, right? You say, well, look what Sean McDermott's done since 2017. Look where Buffalo was the previous decade. And then the following decade, since Sean McDermott came, they're a perennial powerhouse now. They're the favorite in the AFC East every year. They won 5 straight division titles. So we've seen this a lot in sports, and it's going to be an interesting story to see a team that's been consistently very good. Can Joe Brady be the guy to help Josh Allen and company get over the top?
I liken Buffalo over the last few years to Leinster rugby all the time, because I think it's a similar idea where you're chasing this championship in Europe, in Leinster's case, in the Super Bowl, obviously in Buffalo's case, and they keep getting close, they keep banging on the door, and then not getting there. And every year you get this sort of existential self-scouting process at the end of it, like, oh, well, what needs to change? What do we need? And both teams, actually, both organizations have fairly well stayed the course and not changed anything dramatic and not done anything crazy and just tried to get over that final hurdle. But like Leinster, the problem for Buffalo is it basically all comes down to a game or two in January, right? Like, yeah. I don't really see a world where the Bills don't make the playoffs this year, barring the usual caveats that every team is dealing with, like if Josh Allen goes down, blah, blah, blah. So, like, generally speaking, whatever their range of outcomes is, they're probably a playoff team. And then it's like their season basically comes down to, do you show up against whichever team you're going to play once you get there? If you don't, it was a failure, nothing worked, blow it all up again, do something more dramatic, blah, blah, blah. And then if you do, you just put it off for a week. Now you got to do it again. And then only winning a Super Bowl is the thing that would say, it all worked. It was all success. So it's this weird spot. And the problem is that you can change quite a lot and still end up in exactly the same spot. And this is, again, like Leinster, most years have been more or less the same. And then this year they were kind of down, ended up still in the same spot. Then they got waxed once they got to the final. And everyone's like, yeah, but they were just a worse team this time around, right? But it didn't. So it's an interesting time for Buffalo because they've made the fundamental shift. They've gone, all right, let's do something significant. We're getting rid of Sean McDermott, and now it has to work. And if it ends up broadly in the same space, which is we're a good playoff team, and then once you get to January, it's anything can happen. It's the playoffs. They're all good teams. I mean, who knows if it works?
The interesting thing about football, and I know old heads in football might say, well, there's a strategy to win in the playoffs. It's run the ball and stop the run. It's not really the truth. But in other sports, there are ways, like in the NBA in a 7-game series or whatever, that you play differently in the playoffs, that you could build a team specifically to win in the playoffs versus the regular season. I don't know that football has that equivalent. So to put a bow on this, I don't know if there's like some magic button that the Bills have not pushed that says, hey, come playoff time, we were missing X, and now we've solved X. Maybe it's an X receiver. Maybe that is it. But I don't know if it's that simple when it comes to football.
And we may finally have run out of the magic of, like it looked for years, every conversation you would have about the playoffs gets broken because Tom Brady was basically imperious, and then it looked like Patrick Mahomes was going to pick up where Brady left off. And you're like, this is ridiculous. It shouldn't be like this, but these two guys are breaking everything. And now all of a sudden Mahomes' magic has run out, right? And maybe this is actually reaching this equilibrium that should exist, which is, look, it's really hard to win in the playoffs. Most teams are not able to do it with any kind of regularity, and Brady just broke that for 20 years, right? And, okay, you know, you would argue that, but even Montana, like, the 49ers had to bang their head against the wall for a little bit before they got it done. It should be hard, and just because you end up not achieving it, you know, Buffalo in the 90s, Buffalo now, like, it doesn't mean there's some great failing. It's just like you ran up against a different really good team and weren't able to get them 4 times in a row or whatever.
And just because it's in the news right now and it might be dated by the time you're watching this, Vita Vea has requested a trade for the Bucs. I do think the Bills would be one of the teams that made a lot of sense for them. I know they have Deion Walker as a 350-pound defensive tackle, but he's more of still like an interior penetrator. Vita can hold the point, but he moves extremely well, obviously. He's been a great athlete. If you want to, it does feel like the Bills' run defense doesn't show up in some big games as well, and Vita has been a part of some great run defenses with the Bucs. Obviously, he's a big part of that. I would just be kicking the tires on that. I don't know if you want to pay him the type of money that he wants at this point in his career, but of all the fits in the NFL, I think the Bills are at least in this discussion anytime there's an impact defensive tackle out there.
Yeah, I mean, Vea would make a lot of sense for them. My stance with this tends to be the same, which is requesting a trade as a contract negotiation tactic.
That's a news story for us to respond to.
Yeah, I mean, look, Myles Garrett did eventually get traded, but when he requested a trade, that resulted in a $40 million a year contract extension, not him getting traded, right? Like, this is, generally speaking, what this is a public declaration that you're unhappy with the way the negotiations have gone so far and would like more pressure applied to the team. So my current stance is Vita Vea is going nowhere, but we'll see.
All right, that's the Bills. Over-under is 10.5. What are you going to take here, and is this the year for the Bills? We got to answer. We don't do this with every team. Is this the year for the Bills to win their Super Bowl? If not now, when?
If not now, when? Over, because why not?
Yeah.
And no, it's not the year, because it's probably not.
Over and probably not because there's 31 other teams.
Yeah.
Probably a good answer. All right, Miami Dolphins are up next.
By the way, imagine Buffalo actually sort of sweeping all in front of them in the AFC this year, like looking like the team, getting to the AFC, and then the Rams are as good as everyone expects them. They just get annihilated in the Super Bowl by the best team in the NFL.
That'd be your rugby equivalent.
Yeah, same. That would 100%. That would actually be this year's Leinster team, right? Yeah. They get all the way through the final. They get actually a kind of lucky way through the playoff draw, and then they just run into clearly the best team in Europe this year and just get the crap kicked out of them in the biggest game. Like, that would be Buffalo this year if they went all the way through the AFC. The AFC is maybe a little bit down this year, and then they run into the Rams, who are every bit as good as everyone expects them to be. And Myles Garrett and Aaron Donald just like run through their offensive line, destroy them. That would be 100% this year's Leinster.
Put it on record. All right, completely different discussion here. Miami Dolphins are up next. We're not talking Super Bowl with the Dolphins. We're talking rebuild for multiple reasons here, because John Eric Sullivan comes in as general manager. We got a whole new regime here in Miami. They got rid of most of their good players this offseason, and they have one of the most difficult schedules in the NFL. So it all adds up to, hey, the Dolphins are rebuilding. They go from a team that's moved on from Mike McDaniel, from Tua, have moved on from Tyreek Hill and this explosive offense. They've traded Jalen Waddle. They have stripped it all down for parts, as you like to say, to build it back up the Packers way, which was John Eric Sullivan's history.
Which also means we'll hate it going forward.
Yeah, they're going to draft. No, we kind of liked their draft, though, this year. It was a good, diverse draft as far as productive players, upside players, injured players. Thoughts on the Dolphins and what we should be watching for, though, with them this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to see an awful lot of positivity this season from Miami, except all those young players that they brought in the draft and, seeing which guys show anything, which guys stick, which guys are obviously going to be parts of the future. Like, love Jacob Rodriguez, see what he can do. Really like Chris Bell, see what his return looks like, how long it takes him to get him in. Chris Johnson, the corner. Like, there are some really interesting players to add to that. But, as you said, it's a bad football team roster-wise. They have the second hardest schedule in the NFL, according to the sort of Warren Sharp's Vegas forecasted win totals of opponents, as opposed to last year's record. And we said this before, it's really only at the extremes where that makes any real difference. 28, 27 teams are basically in a block in the middle. But there's 3 teams with easier schedules than the rest of the league, and there's really 2 teams with significantly harder schedules, and Miami is one of those 2 teams. So they're one of the worst rosters in the NFL, facing one of the hardest schedules in the NFL. It's hard to see much optimism there.
But you want to see what they have going forward, and one of the bigger stories this offseason was they signed quarterback Malik Willis, and they brought him in $22.5 million a year. The story about Willis, too, which was fascinating. He's a mid-round pick with the Titans. Looks awful when he has a chance to start for Tennessee. There was a point where he was discussed as a first-round pick in the 2022 NFL draft, never materialized, and he just did not look ready to play football. And then all of a sudden, the 2024 season hits. I think it was week 2. Jordan Love's injured. Malik Willis steps in, and it's like, this looks pretty good. And then he had another start, and it looked pretty good. And every time Malik Willis stepped in, either in relief in a game or spot start for the Packers over the last 2 years, he's looked incredible. And I got to go back. I'll give me a second, and I'll read the difference in his stats because it's worth rehashing what we've seen, albeit on a tiny sample size. But the difference, I don't know if we've seen a quarterback in recent history who's had as different of an experience across the 2 different teams. When he was in granted, it's 3 starts in both places and a couple relief appearances, but he goes from 53% completion percentage to 78.7, 53 in Tennessee, 79 essentially in Green Bay, passer rating of 49 to 134. So everything about it, sack rate from 17, still high, it's 11, but it's adjusted. Pro Football Reference has adjusted net yards per attempt, where they bake in touchdowns and interceptions. He goes from 1.7 to 10.4. So it's just everything looks different. And that all of a sudden we're watching this unfold last year. Like, man, Malik Willis is going to get paid. Like, somebody's going to pay him. And we were thinking maybe it's the Jets or the Steelers or it's a team that wants to rebuild. And it ends up a team that's rebuilding in Miami but doesn't give him maybe the supporting cast. It's essentially a 1.5 year deal. It's like a 2-year deal here for Malik Willis to see what he has. But your point all offseason has been, can you actually see what he has with a depleted receiving core, a mediocre offensive line? Can you actually get the most out of Malik Willis?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because everyone wants to already nail down exactly what he is, which is it's kind of impossible, right? We've seen an incredibly small sample size. It's even more impossible in Miami because they've just dismantled the receiving core and he's got almost nobody to throw to. And so we don't really know what he is yet, other than to say, as you said, he went from looking completely non-viable. And I don't mean just can't start. I mean, like, doesn't belong in the NFL. In his time in Tennessee, he looked like somebody that shouldn't be on an NFL roster. He got benched from a preseason game because they couldn't get him to just stand in the pocket and make a throw. It's like every play he was trying to run and scramble. And Mike Vrabel was like, I know you can do that. I need you to work on actually delivering the ball where it's supposed to be. And so he pulled him from preseason game. Like, it's about as big of an indictment on a guy as you're ever going to get. And then LaFleur, Green Bay went after this guy, prioritized him. I mean, they traded for him. They didn't just pick him up when he got cut. They traded for him, and when they needed him, the first game he had to start was a sort of a very custom, let's build a rudimentary offense around this guy and just muddle our way through it. But really, from that point on, they've had him running, like, not quite the exact same offense as Jordan Love, but like a real offense. It's not like he's just been in some gimmick system and, one read relying on his legs, blah, blah, blah. They've had him running a real offense. And he's looked, at minimum, extremely viable and potentially very good. So I still think there's absolutely a fuzzy line between that and, where he's going to be, how good he's going to be going forward. But it's really interesting to see what he's going to do now being given this opportunity, particularly because, as you said, the receiving core is pretty rough. I don't know if he's got a fair opportunity to show what he can do, but it will be fascinating to watch a guy like that just being given a bigger sample size and let all of us hone in a bit more on what he is.
A fair question on Willis. Our friend Greg Cosell has brought this up. He's never thrown more than 23 passes in a game. Reminder, I want to be on both sides of this, as usual. Very impressed with what Willis has done, like his balance in the pocket, his accuracy. We knew that he could run, and he was, I thought, an opportunistic runner. And I think Green Bay did a nice job of mixing in his legs when they needed. But at the same time, you have to throw more than 23 times in most NFL games as a starter. And so you haven't seen him in this like carry the offense or high volume type of opportunity. And to your point, Tutu Atwell and Jalen Tolbert and Malik Washington and Chris Bell whenever he gets back, and Taj Washington. These are the receivers he's throwing to. The great Greg Dulcich at tight end. Fantasy hype for the 10th straight year for Dulcich.
The great.
So he's the great, even though he's not great yet. So yeah, I don't know what you're going to see. And our old friend Bobby Slowick taking over as offensive coordinator as well. But very impressed with how Malik Willis has progressed. But it's not like he's without questions. I thought it was still a fine move by the Dolphins because $22.5 million for a quarterback these days, that's half the price of what most, half the league's already making. So it's not that big of an investment for Miami to, hopefully see what you have in him. And if things go well, as they're rebuilding, you say, okay, maybe he's the guy for us to finally re-up and invest in long term.
Yeah, it's a harmless move from their point of view in terms of, like you said, it's basically 1.5 years of guaranteed money. So if it's a total disaster this year, it's fine, right? They're already paying him this year, whatever. So, and this year doesn't matter. They had to pay somebody. So 1 year is this year to find out. And then if it doesn't work out so much that you get rid of him, say at the end of this year, you're only on the hook for another half year's worth of guaranteed money, which is a reasonable penalty effectively for getting it wrong and having to go in a different direction, particularly as if it goes that badly wrong, you're probably drafting somebody at the top of the draft. So financially, it's not working any worse. The only issue to me is, does it make sense to bring in a guy, try and see if he has anything, but then really not give him any opportunity to actually show that? Like, is that helpful in any way, shape, or form, or should they have tried to do, I'm not saying the competitive rebuild thing, but should they have tried harder to give him some viability around him so that you had a better analysis of whether he's actually the guy?
Like,
or is this like,
even if they had kept Jalen Waddle, you would say, man, does he even have enough to show? And they traded Waddle.
I guess, yeah. I guess the point is, do they believe in him? Do they believe in him at all if they're shipping away any ability he has to actually be good? And he's effectively just the sacrificial quarterback for a year or two for them to rebuild this roster, and they just need a name, right? Like, is that what this is, or are they asking him to do something that seems so unreasonable that it's just unlikely to happen?
Defensively, and I want to touch on their draft quickly before we wrap up Miami, but defensively, thought Miami underachieved the first half of the season was bad. I mean, they were getting out-physicaled pretty badly, and it's not like they're without name recognition or previously productive players. Chop Robinson regressed in his second year. Kenneth Grant just looked overwhelmed as a rookie, probably outperformed by Jordan Phillips, who got drafted much later than him at defensive tackle. Zach Sealer, his worst year in a while. So it's not like they have talent, either upside players like Kenneth Grant or players who have done it before in the NFL like Sealer and Chop Robinson. I expect their defensive line to play better. I thought Jordan Brooks was one of the best linebackers in the NFL last year. Just an absolute monster in the run game without any support up front. They played a little bit better down the stretch. There was some hype around media circles around the Dolphins. I think a lot of that was the teams that they played. They didn't have the hardest schedule. So I thought they were underwhelming defensively, but they're starting to build that back up. Jacob Rodriguez, one of my favorite players in the draft. Chris Johnson at corner, one of my favorite players in the draft. But you're still looking at some unknowns on the defense and players who either in year 3 or 4, or in Sealer's case, later in his career, that have to get back to where they were previously.
Yeah, I mean, the defensive line, I think, is the big variable there because Kenneth Grant, Chop Robinson, Zach Sealer, those 3 guys in particular, like they should all be reasonably solid at worst productive players. Robinson has shown he can be a very good pass rusher. Maybe the run defense will always be a weakness for him, but at least as a designated pass rusher, he can bring juice. Kenneth Grant, first-round pick a year ago. And then Zach Sealer, a guy who's been a very good player for the majority of his career. Those 3 guys should be 3 legitimate forces on the defensive line, and all of them were like outright bad or nondescript last year. That shouldn't happen. And if that happens again, the back 7 has no shot, like because there's nobody on the defensive line then making an impact. If those 3 guys all go back to either being something like their best, or in Kenneth Grant's case, takes a step forward and becomes an impact player, well, then that changes the ability of Chris Johnson, the rookie, Jacob Rodriguez, the rookie, Jordan Brooks, the rest of that back 7 to actually make an impact. But if the defensive line stinks, those guys have no shot.
All right, let's wrap up the Dolphins with this. I mentioned John Eric Sullivan coming in. Jeff Hafley comes in as the head coach. Should have mentioned that earlier. Both coming from Green Bay. The most Packers draft ever. The Dolphins heading into, or as of last year, they had the fewest draft picks in the league over like a 4-year period. They come in, I just counted in, they had 13 picks, very Packers-like, including Caden Proctor first, a guy that could play tackle, could play guard. They're going to start him at guard, very Packers-like. They had 3 wide receivers, Caleb Douglas, Chris Bell, Kevin Coleman from Missouri. Very Packers-like to double up or triple up at a position. They drafted 2 tight ends, Will Kazmarek and another Traore from Mississippi State. So 2 linebackers in name, Jacob Rodriguez and Kyle Lewis. Lewis might be more of like a nickel hybrid player, but some intriguing players, like I said, productive college players like Chris Johnson, Jacob Rodriguez, the perceived high upside of a Caden Proctor, the perceived high upside of Chris Bell, who looked like a potential first-round receiver before he tore his ACL. Michael Taff at safety, just a productive, good college player. Like they might have 5 or 6 contributors out of this group, and what does success look like for the Dolphins? I think you're coming out of this season saying, hey, Malik Willis has officially turned a corner in his career. He's a good player, a QB to build around. And, hey, look, 5, 6, 7 draft picks are all a part of our future. And, yeah, we only won 3 or 4 games, but you at least feel good about where this thing's trending.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with so many draft picks, the thing that they could feel good about is several of those players looking like they can be impact players going forward. I mean, they had a lot of guys that we really liked as draft picks. If they all hit, or if they all look like they're going to hit after year 1, you could feel great about this team, even if Willis doesn't look like the answer. But the young guys around him look really good. You'd be comfortable drafting a quarterback, putting him into that kind of situation going forward. Malik Willis, if he looks great, obviously that's fantastic for them, given how little help would be around him. It would be kind of like Drake May from a couple of years ago. It's like this situation should not be possible to look good in, and yet he's making it happen. That would be fantastic for them. If he doesn't look good, if it's a disaster, it's not the worst thing in the world because, as we said, it's sort of set up to be the shot to nothing where they just pivot, they just move away from him. Maybe they keep him on the roster, but now he's a backup to the guy that comes in. It's fine because this is a team targeting a couple of years down the line, not right now.
It had to be a multi-year rebuild because of the stat I said, fewest draft picks over a 4-year period, whereas the Packers had the most over that period. They're going to be doing that. They're going to be drafting 10 to 15 times, probably 10 to 12 times over the next few years, build back the depth, and that's what the Dolphins are doing right now. And they also have the difficult schedule on top of it. So the over-under is just 4.5. So not expecting much from Miami. Would you go over on that, though? Can they sneak a few if Willis carries them a couple games?
I mean, they could if he does. I'm going to go under, though, because between the lack of talent and the schedule, it just feels rough.
The other part of this, too, if Willis is just average, right? If he's dead smack in between what he was in 3 games in Green Bay and 3 games in Tennessee, which is more than likely, to be honest. They're sitting there with 3 wins, 4 wins. They're very much in the mix to draft a quarterback in the first round next year as well. Like, so the Willis contract, it's not like they're tied to him for 4 or 5 years. They could be drafting a quarterback high next year as well.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the New England Patriots. Fascinating story, because last year at this time we were like, man, I think they're going to be better, but the range of outcomes, wouldn't be surprised if the Patriots won 6 games or if they won 10. I think it was maybe the phrase that we used. They surpassed that. They go all the way to the Super Bowl, win the AFC East for the first time since Tom Brady left town. It was Mike Vrabel's first year as head coach. Drake May finished his second in the MVP race. So everything got better in New England. There were questions about the difficulty of the schedule, but they took it all the way to the Super Bowl, beat some good teams along the way, maybe had a bit of a gimme with the Broncos and the injury to Bo Nix in the AFC Championship. But impressive first season for Mike Vrabel, impressive second year for Drake May. You have some of the off-field controversy with Vrabel and the Rossini stuff. So plenty of drama here in New England. Plus you have A.J. Brown finally being traded for and brought in to this receiving core. What are your thoughts on the Patriots?
Yeah, obviously they benefited from one of the easiest schedules in NFL history, but they were a good team. Both sides of the ball were solid. Most importantly, Drake May took a big step forward and had that MVP caliber season, looked spectacular. And we've said this repeatedly, as much as the overall strength of schedule, their opponents were weak, the pass defenses were not particularly weak. So what we saw from Drake May was pretty legit, and he looked pretty spectacular outside of the playoffs. It's worth, he was pretty bad in the playoffs, but they were against literally the top 3 defenses in football. He sequentially went against all of the best defenses in the NFL. And to me, the playoffs signaled more his supporting cast ran out of ability than it did Drake May ran out of ability. Will Campbell, who was as a rookie, let's say, an average left tackle going up against Will Anderson Jr. is going to get destroyed. That's pretty much what happened in the playoffs. But, this is a good football team who you would say was ahead of schedule last year, right? We said, sure, they had a really broad range of outcomes, but even in that, they overachieved. So now the question is, can they keep that momentum going? Can they build on last year? Can they even maintain where they were based off a harder schedule this year? And the biggest variable in all that, I think, is the A.J. Brown addition.
Let me start with May, because you're right. I think the fact that they went against the Chargers, Texans, Broncos, and Seahawks.
Yeah. I think that's the 4. I think by whatever measure, I think that was the top 4 defenses in football.
Especially pass defenses.
Yeah.
I really thought that the Texans may have been the best defense I've seen in a decade. The Broncos have been outstanding. Seattle was probably right there with the Texans outside of a couple games against the Rams. I mean, they won the Super Bowl, obviously. So it was a tough stretch, and Will Campbell couldn't block. A third of Drake May's turnover-worthy plays came in that 4-game stretch. So if you add up all of his turnover-worthy plays, regular and postseason, a third of them came in the postseason alone. And I thought that was more of the story for May, was I thought he was trying to do too much in the playoffs. He's under pressure and still trying to throw through it, and he was fumbling and just, making some bad decisions there. But at the same time, there was some grittiness to it too. It's like the Chargers game wasn't great. It was a low-scoring game, and he made a couple big throws. The Texans game, tough conditions, and he wasn't playing great, and he makes 2 or 3 big throws in crunch time. He didn't do as much in the Broncos game or the Seahawks game, but he did make some big throws, and overall the body of work for May last year was far more good than bad, right? I mean, there's a reason why he was second in the MVP race. So his ability to throw the ball down the field consistently, I thought, scrambling his 2 years, he's been outstanding, good decisions, and using his legs properly. And I think he's tightened up a lot of the questions that people had coming out of UNC, where it's like, hey man, why are you bouncing a 5-yard hitch? Why are you missing a little swing route? I think he's handled a lot of those. The things we say Caleb Williams needs to improve upon, some similarities of hit the gimmies, hit the easy stuff. I think Drake May's done a better job with that. Now, Stephon Diggs was good for them last year. He was a dependable go-to guy. They bring in A.J. Brown to essentially replace Stephon Diggs, and A.J. Brown has been better than Stephon Diggs for the majority of his career, but he's coming off of his worst, most inconsistent season. But I think there's still enough left in the tank for A.J. Brown to win on the outside, and even when he doesn't win, he still wins, right? Even when he's not creating separation on the outside, his ball skills are incredible. I think I think he still has plenty left to make an impact here. But you also have Romeo Doubs coming in, who's like your quintessential number 2 receiver. If you remember A.J. Brown when he came into the league, he was the one on the outside for Tennessee. The number 2 was the great Corey Davis, who by the end of his career was just a good, dependable number 2 receiver. Might be the best comp, to be honest, for Romeo Doubs and the type of receiver that he is. Intermediate routes, gets open. Doubs and Brown, I think, are a really nice 1-2 punch to go with what the other playmakers that they have at tight end and in the slot.
Yeah, I mean, A.J. Brown is the huge variable. Like, at 29 years old, there's no reason I don't think that he can't go back to being one of the best receivers in the NFL. I've seen, some people have questioned his knee, whether that's a long-term permanent problem and that's going to hamper him. I mean, if they get just last year's version of A.J. Brown, it should make this team better overall. I know Stephon Diggs was very good for them last year, but overall you would say Brown, Romeo Doubs coming in, Pop Douglas, Kayshon Boutte, Kyle Williams still there, Matt Collins still there. Like, it's a good receiving core, even with just last year's version of A.J. Brown, assuming he's sort of motivated and trying and, going 100%. If they get vintage peak of his powers, A.J. Brown, I mean, this becomes one of the better receiver cores in the NFL immediately. And if they get something in the middle, it's very good. So for the second year in a row, they've done repeated and significant work on both the receiving core for Drake May to throw to and the offensive line to protect him. They've hit both of those for 2 consecutive years, and it looks on paper like they've done a good job.
And so last year at this time, we were saying Drake May's coming off of a rookie season where he had a bottom 5 offensive line, bottom 5 group of playmakers. The playmakers got better. The O-line got better last year, and I think they're even better this year. Campbell, as you mentioned, average for most of the season, struggled down the stretch. The knee injury was a big factor. I still get concerned about when he loses, when he just goes up against better defensive linemen, but I think he'll be good enough at left tackle. They have a buy low on an injured Elijah Vera Tucker. They're going to move second-year player Jared Wilson from guard to center, his college position. Mike Edwenu has been solid at right guard, and then the great Morgan Moses at right tackle returns. And then they future-proofed it with Caleb Lomu, their first-round pick, who I thought he was the best developmental tackle in the draft. You get him late first round. You can ease him in. Maybe he takes over at right tackle in 2027. I think they've set up well on the offensive line. Run game, 1-2 punch of Ramondre Stevenson and Travion Henderson. Travion's big playability showed up in a ton of games. I think they're in a really good spot offensively, even better than they were last year. The big story for the Patriots this year, I think, is going to be the team might be better, but the record might be worse because of the schedule, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's the offense as well. The offense might be better personnel-wise and upside-wise, but who knows if it shows up on the field. Defensively, the other underrated story was how well they played down the stretch and in the playoff run. I mean, they looked really good. Now, again, they had a C.J. Stroud implosion. Did they cause some of that? They got to face Jarrett Stidham in the AFC Championship, but they faced MVP candidate Justin Herbert in the wild card round. So the defense was very good down the stretch. My question for them is the defensive line. Did they do enough as far as pure pass rushers? Harold Landry's there. Draymond Jones, they sign in free agency. They lose Kayvon Chason. They draft Gabe Akis in round 2 out of Illinois, who just signed. I don't know if they've got enough juice off the edge, though, this year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious about whether, because remember for years in Tennessee, their personnel never looked great, and yet they always overachieved and looked really good.
Yep.
I do wonder if Mike Vrabel is one of those coaches that gets a higher level out of the personnel than they look on paper, and you're always going to be underwhelmed by looking at the depth chart and saying this is what this defense is. I agree that doesn't look like a spectacular unit on paper. There's some weaknesses. There's a bit of meh about it. Like, there aren't that many real impact playmakers for them. But I do wonder if Vrabel's just able to get better than that out of these guys. Milton Williams was a big player for them. He missed some time last year.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they don't have the playmakers. I'm just more worried about
they don't have
the depth everywhere.
Christian Gonzalez is a great player. Milton Williams is a great player when he's healthy. Kevin Byard is reaching sort of the end of his career. Like, outside, those are really it in terms of like impact high-end players. Then there's a lot of just okay, average, solid, and then there's some guys that are going to be starting for them that you're like, these guys are not phenomenal.
Christian Barmore has his has his flashes. I do love the secondary, though. I really love Christian Gonzalez is about to get paid, maybe become the highest paid corner in the NFL. Him and Carlton Davis on the outside. Love Marcus Jones in the slot. So many games where he makes huge plays. Always loved him, and we've seen him develop over these last couple of years. Byard, you're right, getting a little bit older, but still a ball hawk. I don't think you're banking on 6 or 7 interceptions from him necessarily, but it's always in the cards, like last year out of nowhere. And Craig Woodson was really good as a rookie at safety. So I do like I like the secondary parts of the back seven as a whole. I do worry about the down-to-down pass rush outside of maybe Milton Williams when he's out there. I think he's been a game changer. So for New England, again, story-wise, I think the offense is as good, if not better, than they were last year when they were one of the league's best. The defense, I think it's a good point. We used to talk about that with Vrabel and his defenses all the time. Like, who's the guy who's stepping up, right? And it was a new somewhat unknown player every single week, no-name defense type. The Patriots have a couple star caliber players, but the sum of the parts was better than I think maybe even just the individual players last year. So they should be fine defensively. It's just a matter, does it all show up record-wise? Their over-under's 10.5 as well. Where are you going to go for the Patriots? Did they overachieve too much in year one going to the Super Bowl? Did they raise the expectations too high?
I'm going to say they go over as well.
By the way, with the Vrabel thing, I know plenty of offseason distractions and the whole thing. Put that aside for 1 second. Vrabel as a head coach, his path as a coach in Tennessee, the fact that they had the number 1 seed that one year when they weren't even that good relative to everyone else in the AFC, and it fell apart in Tennessee toward the end, and he was out. But there was a point where I called him like the next Tomlin, the next high floor coach where you can't lose with him, even if you don't have a great roster. But if you do give him a great roster, then you have a chance to do something special. I believe he has a chance to get back to that point again if you put all the offseason distractions aside and nothing changes from that aspect of things. There's a chance he is just a consistent top 5 NFL coach, and no matter where the roster is, they're going to be a 10-win caliber team, and then you give him the right talent, and boom, they're back, in the playoff mix, in the Super Bowl mix every year.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Over.
Yep.
For New England. Let's wrap it up in the AFC East with the New York Jets. Fascinating offseason for the New York Jets. I think remember my old Jets for Palazzolo for GM Jets shirt, and on the back I said, "We're going to get better."
Yeah,
that was the motto. Jets got better.
They got better
this offseason.
They didn't.
Muji, Darren Muji, general manager.
They didn't need you.
Well, it took them a decade. They didn't have to be slumming it for 10 years. They could have done this 10 years ago, but they finally got better, and I think they got better in a couple different ways. They were pretty active in free agency for a team that's rebuilding, and we always talk about, hey, you want to have this top pick and everything. The Jets have had a fascinating 365 days or so, trading players like Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner for future draft picks and setting themselves up to get the next quarterback. But now, this offseason, they've brought in and traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick and brought in Demario Davis at linebacker and Joseph Asai and traded for Devondre Sweat, bring in Geno Smith to play quarterback. So there's a big mix of veterans who are just good football players, and they still have, 2 draft picks? I'm losing track of all their first rounders. They have 3 heading into next year, I believe.
Yeah, they're
right?
the team.
3 first rounders heading into next year. So they have done a really nice job of making the roster better for this year and also setting themselves up for a quarterback next year. So that's the story for the Jets. And then I loved their draft, my favorite draft of any team, for whatever that's worth. Thoughts on the Jets here?
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to what they do with those 3 first-round picks next year, and in particular, like the quarterback that they get. That's going to be the vital thing. And this all has to be conditions. Like, yeah, I really like what they've done so far, but they also shipped away Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams to make that happen, right? Like, those are 2 very good players that are no longer on this roster. And really, that only makes sense if you then parlay those guys into this quarterback of the future. But overall, the moves that they've made from that point, once they've made that decision of let's trade away the really valuable assets we have and then let's rebuild this thing, I really like what they've done. You can see, I think, the joined-up thinking. They've added veterans at every level of the defense. They, I thought, had a really nice draft. The Geno Smith thing is interesting. It's, maybe there's a better player in there than we saw from last year. But if he's just sort of done now, then, the quarterback situation could be a really rough ride this year. Which from their perspective, it's not the worst thing in the world because, 3 first-round draft picks. If one of them's really high, that's fine.
Yeah. I almost don't care what happens with Geno Smith.
Yeah.
If I'm the Jets, I guess. I don't know.
Maybe. It's just, it doesn't feel good having Geno as your starting quarterback based off what happened last year.
Yeah, unless you're hoping to get the top pick, a top quarterback selection.
Yeah, which I don't think this is a selection to tank. I don't think Geno is a quarterback brought
No, I
in.
agree. That's why I'm saying I don't even if he's good. Okay, great. Then you gave Garrett Wilson finally had somebody to get the ball to him consistently, or someone to unlock A.D. Mitchell, right?
Who will be this year's hype merchant again.
So, yeah, the Geno Smith thing, it's just I think they got a bridge quarterback. I mean, we have to be honest about Geno's career. Last year he was awful, maybe the worst starting
nobody's
quarterback.
Nobody's going to be honest about it. It's
There's no honesty anywhere.
But it's also it doesn't make any sense. It's not like a linear line. It's not a static thing. It's been all over the place.
But from 22 to 24, he was a mid-tier starter in the NFL. 2022, he finally starts after 9 years in the league. Finally gets a chance to start again, and he became a mid-tier starter. They were a fringe playoff team, or snuck into the playoffs in Seattle. 22 to 24, he's a mid-tier starter who I thought had some decision-making issues, red zone issues, but was also good overall. Bounced back from those things. Last year, it was awful. Everything was bad about the Raiders' offense. The offensive line was atrocious. Apparently, nobody liked Chip Kelly. I don't know. Geno was terrible. He was making terrible decisions. Looked like he wasn't reading coverage, was throwing the ball to the defense. Everything was bad. If he had done that in 2015, you'd be like, of course, this is Geno Smith, the bust who just got drafted 2 years ago, and this is how he plays.
Right.
Just happened, after 3 good starting seasons. So, yeah, you're right. I don't know what you get from Geno, but the Jets had a good, dependable offensive line that stayed relatively healthy. They've got Garrett Wilson. They're trying – I kind of liked just getting A.D. Mitchell in the Sauce Gardner deal as a buy low, see what you have. The A.D. Mitchell story for you and I has been, man, every time he gets targeted, it seems like him and the quarterback are not on the same page. He is QB-proof in that sense, that he's not on the same page with any quarterback historically. But he's talented. He's really talented, moves well, gets in and out of routes, athletic at the catch point. See it, worth it as a buy low. Loved Omar Cooper Jr. As a late first-round pick when they got him. And so got some pass catchers to develop and see what happens with Geno Smith.
Yeah, I mean, again, like you said, the Geno Smith thing is weird, but I love a lot of the moves they made. Omar Cooper Jr. really liked that. Kenyon Sadiq in this draft where everyone was chasing tight ends. Like, people raised eyebrows because they already had Mason Taylor from a year ago. But number one, I think those two can coexist. And number two, everybody was chasing multiple tight ends. So maybe that looks even more sensible sort of once you look at the hindsight of what that draft was going to be later on. And then look, as much as we kind of scoff at the idea that Adonai Mitchell the switch could flip and maybe he becomes the guy, it's not impossible. Like, just because we've seen people before always flatter to deceive in August and then, that's just who they are. They're never going to take that step forward. He's got the physical tools to be a dominant playmaker, right? He could become a phenomenal wide receiver at the NFL level if he can get it together. If he can't, fine. It's not the worst thing in the world. Garrett Wilson is extremely good. Omar Cooper Jr. we have high hopes for, and then those tight ends and Breece Hall at running back, Braylon Allen as well. It's a talented group of playmakers. The offensive line should be solid, not spectacular maybe. Really good bookend tackles. The interior is more of a question. But it should be a pretty good offense if Geno can play anything like he was before.
They retained Breece Hall at running back, so you have his receiving ability, big playability. So, yeah, I think they could be sneaky good offensively. Where I was really wrong on the Jets last year is I thought they'd be feisty. I thought Justin Fields would – maybe keep a couple defenses off balance with his legs, and they would just, trudge through a couple games and win, and they didn't at all. They were not good offensively. They were even worse defensively. That side of the ball, the motto, we'll get better, should be much better. They gave up 36 passing touchdowns, didn't have an interception, NFL record, 0 interceptions in a full season. They allowed opposing quarterbacks to basically be the MVP of the league, all of them. I mean, honestly, Drake May have gotten MVP votes because of his 5-touchdown game against the Jets. They couldn't rush the passer, they couldn't cover, couldn't do anything. But this offseason, they bring in a whole new defensive line. Joseph Asai from the Bengals, first rounder, David Bailey from Texas Tech. They get him with the number 2 overall pick. I thought that was the right move for them. Traded for Devondre Sweat, Jermaine Johnson out, Sweat in. David Onyemata was another interesting move that I thought more of a contending team should have gone after Onyemata, but they give him 1 year, $10.5 million. I think it's like a weird move on the surface for a team like the Jets that are rebuilding, because Onyemata is good, man. He's a disruptive interior defensive lineman who's 10 years into his career, but he could be just trade fodder. Before the trade deadline, you get something for him, and that ends up being a worthwhile move for the Jets. Will McDonald comes back, so they should be better rushing the passer. And I mentioned some of the other back 7 additions of Demario Davis, who's returning to the Jets. It's like 2013 all over again with Demario Davis and Geno Smith in New York. Micah Fitzpatrick at safety. Nashawn Wright coming off of his career year at corner. So, yeah, they have some veterans sprinkled in here with the youth.
Yeah, it's an interesting mix of, established, solid, proven veterans and then young guys that presumably there's going to be some kind of mentorship attached to and try and bring them along as well. Micah Fitzpatrick, really good player. Demario Davis, good player and incredibly storied, NFL player. Onyemata, as you mentioned, there's a lot. And then these young guys, David Bailey, D'Angelo Pons, these guys with big-time talent to add to that group. It'll be interesting to see how that gels, how quickly it comes together. But it's a good process, I think.
So, yeah, I thought we were sitting here during free agency time, and we usually, I don't know about you, but I generally put teams into one of 2 camps, right? You're either rebuilding or you're trying to contend, right? And a lot of times when the rebuilding team starts, doing 1-year deals or bringing in veterans, I have a little pause. I'm like, is this really what you want to do? Is there, we theorized, was there discussion internally about, hey, Aaron Glenn was, it was bad in year 1. Is his job at stake already in year 2? And he's the driver of bringing in some of these veterans, whereas the front office is more about thinking long term. But, because they have the 3 firsts next year, because you can't just have an awful product. You still want to have good players. I think it's still a fine mix. And I'll bring that up again. When you bring in a veteran like Demario Davis, or you bring in Joseph Asai, he's more of he's a 3-year deal, but you bring in Onyemata on a 1-year deal. Look, if you're sitting there at 1-6 and a contender needs a defensive tackle, or they want to bring in Demario Davis, you've got trade fodder too. So there's the idea of hey, they'll help you in the short term, but if they don't, you can move on and continue your rebuild. So I think it ends up being a nice mix for the Jets, the way they handled this offseason.
Yeah, I think it's all good so far. The question just looms on the horizon. What's the quarterback plan going to be long term?
And I mentioned the draft, and we talked about it, in pieces. But 3 first-rounders, David Bailey at pick number 2, Kenyon Sadiq at 16. They come back and get Omar Cooper at pick 30. And then my favorite corner in the draft, D'Angelo Pons, in round 2. Fast, one of the better just pure man coverage corners in the entire NFL draft. Those 4 picks, I loved all of them. I'm not saying I would have done it necessarily in that order, but I think Sadiq has receiving ability, and he's still young. Cooper was one of my favorite players in the draft. Pons, one of my favorite players in the draft. I think we'll learn a lot more about Indiana prospects and how they play within that system and convert to the NFL. But I think all 4 players have a chance to make an impact right away, and I think that's what Jets fans are keeping a close eye on. Not so much the veterans that are going to hopefully give them more competitive football week in, week out, but these the 4 top draft picks. If you get good seasons, if they become the Lions 4-player nucleus that they had a couple years ago, and then you stack 3 more first-rounders on top of that, I think Jets fans are feeling pretty good, coming out of this season.
Definitely. And as I said, whether you want to pull the trick of, well, what if you drafted Sadiq and Omar Cooper Jr. in a different order, or you just say, look, look what was happening in the tight end market throughout that draft, but also Kenyon Sadiq can block. It's not like you've drafted 2 players that are in Mason Taylor and Kenyon Sadiq. It's not like you drafted two guys that are the same, right, and have to coexist for one role. Kenyon Sadiq can be in line. He can block in a way that Mason Taylor probably can't. Like, those guys can coexist on the field at the same time. Maybe you don't want to, prioritize Sadiq in that role. Like, I'm not saying you want him as your blocking tight end at all times, but if there are personnel packages where you want multiple tight ends on the field, Sadiq can be the guy in line and let you have Mason Taylor as the move tight end, lined up in the slot. They're not redundant in that regard. So I think generally people were probably too down on the Kenyon Sadiq pick when actually, again, with hindsight, with understanding what that draft was doing in terms of the tight end market, I think it makes a lot more sense.
I mean, blocking tight ends were going 30 picks later, so it's not too bad. All right, AFC East is fascinating, top-heavy with the Patriots and the Bills when it comes to win totals. Jets are at 5.5 over/under. Where are you going to go with the Jets?
I'm going to go over. It's an optimistic show, apparently.
Yeah, if we go over on everybody, because these get sent out as VODs, all the fan bases flock to see the season preview. They'll never know. Like, Jets fans are tuning in just to hear what we say about the Jets. They might not even see the whole show. They won't know that we say over for everybody.
For everybody.
Over for the Jets. And they'll still have a chance at their quarterback next year. All right, Check the Mic is brought to you by FanDuel. And this is for my people here. Baseball fans, if you think you know who's hitting a homer today, well, FanDuel's giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. Joining the action is pretty easy. You just make your free pick on who's hitting a home run in their game, and if you're right, you'll get a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. You've got nothing to lose and a lot to gain. And don't forget, you can make a free pick every day during the MLB season. So I mentioned yesterday, my new Reds fan over here in Cincinnati, not great at winning baseball games, great at hitting dingers, though. So they might be good for daily dingers here. You got Kyle Schwarber tearing it up. You got C.J. Abrams tearing it up right now.
Aren't those two things shouldn't they be quite linked?
It's just like 60% of the Reds' runs come from homers.
Yeah.
They low average. They don't get on base. All they do is hit a bunch of solo homers.
Yeah.
So they're good for daily dingers. They're just not good for winning ball games right now. It's okay, though. It's just another reason why FanDuel is the home for home runs. So you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com/33rd. That's FanDuel.com/33rd to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of MLB. You got to be 21 plus in select states for Kansas and affiliation with Kansas Star Casino. 18 plus in D.C., Kentucky, or Wyoming. No purchase necessary. Opt-in required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus profit boost tokens. Restrictions apply, including any token expiration and max wager amount. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-MY-RESET. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 in Massachusetts. Call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York or call 877-770-7867 in Louisiana. All right, man, we're on to the NFC East in the Dallas Cowboys.
Let's go.
The Cowboys kicking it off. Last year, they were right there with the Bengals 8, 10, 12 games into the season with an historically bad defense. They were getting smoked defensively. Got a little bit better. Things revert back a little bit. But the defense will be a big talking point for us here today. Did that get overhauled properly? But the offense also returns mostly intact. Offensive line returning. Of course, Dak at quarterback. George Pickens is back for at least this year on the franchise tag. Pickens and CeeDee Lamb as the 1-2 punch at wide receiver. What are we looking for the Cowboys this season?
It is kind of a similar story to the Bengals. Like, have they done enough work on the defense that you think it can hold up its end of the bargain? Again, doesn't need to be great, just needs to not be the reason they're losing games, and then let that offense cook, because that offense should cook. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, we keep talking about those two guys, the combination. I think you can throw in more players beyond that, though. Like, Ryan Flanoy is a very good third receiver at this point. Kevontae Turpin is a great gimmick, receiver at this point. Like, that's a really, really good group of receivers. Tight end, they've got some players as well. They re-upped Javonte Williams in the backfield. Dak Prescott obviously is a very good quarterback. Like, and the offensive line is in pretty good shape, with the one caveat maybe of Tyler Guyton at left tackle still being underwhelming, a potential problem. But this offense should be a top 5 unit in the NFL, at which point, the defense doesn't need to be that good.
I think our friend Nate Tice was predicting maybe the Cowboys, is like the outside shot to be the best offense in the NFL.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the Bengals similarities, like you said, the 1-2 punch at receiver, good quarterback, and the continuity. Pretty much everybody back. So offense should be better. The other thing that they have, the other X factor that they have is Marquez Valdez-Scantling is in the building. He is the MVP maker or the Super Bowl maker, either one. So the Cowboys are either going to this is Dak's MVP chance because Valdez-Scantling has been attached to every MVP quarterback literally every year of his career in the last 6 years has been either he's been on a Super Bowl team or MVP team. So just keep an eye on that. Yeah, left tackles, I think the biggest question, Guyton heading into year 3. He was a project coming out of Oklahoma. Still looks like a project battling for his job, I think, with Nathan Thomas. But other than that, the line looks pretty good. They hit on Tyler Booker last year, who looked good as a first-round guard. I think they have a chance to score a lot of points. And I thought there was a point in Dak's season last year where I'm like, man, this is the best he's played. And he was really good while they were giving up 40 points a game early in the season. And by the way, Brian Schottenheimer, second year as head coach, he's taken, through the years, I know the internet people think he was, too conservative or too run this or, not creative or whatever. Brian Schottenheimer, I've brought this up a lot, has been attached to the best little stretch of Russell Wilson's career, the best stretch of Dak's career, most consistent stretch. Brian Schottenheimer has been adjacent to, these quarterbacks who we think are good and then maybe getting a little bit more out of them. So I like where this offense is for this season.
Yeah. I think the offense, I have a lot of confidence in the offense. I think that's a very deep and talented group, really across the board. The only real question mark is that left tackle spot with Tyler Guyton. Outside of that, you would say you would have a lot of confidence in this being a very good offense overall. The question and the sort of interesting side of the ball for them is what is the defense going to be like?
Yeah, we'll spend the rest of the time on the defense. Have the Cowboys fix their defense. Christian Parker comes in as defensive coordinator from the Philadelphia Eagles. So the initial, I repeat this a million times, just because a guy worked for whichever coordinator or head coach doesn't mean the scheme is exactly like for like, but the Fangio, too high, invite the run, win up front type of system, that's broad terms, that's floating around the NFL now a lot more. Is that what Dallas is able to do? Is that what they're going to try to do, first off? And then secondly, are they capable of doing it? Because just before last season, they trade Micah Parsons, and not just because they traded him was it a strange move. It's a strange move for a team that's looking to contend year in, year out, and they're like, well, we'll just get 2 first-round picks in the future. Their defensive line, they've thrown a lot of bodies at it. High draft picks, free agents. Have they replaced Micah Parsons in the aggregate here?
Yeah. They have, but it makes you wonder what would have happened if they just added some bodies to Micah Parsons,
right,
and paid him a lot of money in the first place. Like that would be the counterfactual or the alternative history there. But given, again, kind of like the Jets, once you've stipulated that they have traded away Micah Parsons, they have done a really good job of rebuilding this group, and it does now look like a really interesting defensive line on paper heading into the season. Quinnen Williams made a big impact when he came over. I think Rashawn Gary is a really good buy low because he shouldn't have been anywhere near as bad as he was a year ago. So you would assume he'll be better this year just without any difference. Donovan Ezraku, I think, took steps forward, is looking like he could be a useful player. Obviously, Malachi Lawrence in the draft in the first round was an eyebrow raiser for some people, seen as a reach by some, but was a guy that was being talked about as a first-round player, another one of these twitchy, speed, explosive edge rushers. So they've added a lot of bodies. Trading away a Diggy Zua was a move that I didn't quite understand. That didn't help, but overall it's a good, deep group of defensive linemen.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue, I think DeMarcus Lawrence was really underrated during his time with the Cowboys, and Diggy Zua was really good. I mean, I don't know if this is my point is I don't know if this is a better defensive line than they had, say, 3 years ago.
Right.
But certainly a lot better than it was last year after trading Parsons. Yeah. And a full year now getting Quinnen Williams.
That's
and a
kind
full
of the
year
point,
of Kenny
right?
Clark.
It's like, what if you just added a body or two to the defensive line that had Micah Parsons? It's like, once you've shipped away Micah Parsons and you've got like nothing, then you've done a really good job of rebuilding from that point. But did you need to do that at all?
But I love Ezeraku. I think he was fantastic as a second rounder. I like the buy low on Rashawn Gary. Like, we were down on him, but they didn't give up much.
He wasn't good last year at all.
Gary.
But like, that didn't make any sense. So I'm all for rolling the dice that he bounces back to something like his previous baseline, even if he doesn't get. Like, we were expecting him to have a career year last year because Micah Parsons was now on the other side. He did, but it was a career year in the opposite direction. It was a career worst year.
And then you mentioned Malachi Lawrence. Our friend John Ledyard was on here talking about his edge rankings. He surprisingly had him at number 1 because of his bend and burst and twitchiness. So there's some developing to do there, especially in the run game with Lawrence. But I think they have a nice body type buffet and diversified portfolio on the defensive line. You have Jayshon Barham, who is a linebacker hybrid and converted late in his career to edge rusher, officially moved him to edge rusher at Michigan, much like Micah Parsons, by the way. So Barham has some of that pass rush upside, as does Lawrence. Ezeraku, I think, is going to be a dependable player. You've got the buy low on Rashawn Gary. Quinnen Williams is a star. Kenny Clark is dependable. So it's just a good mix on the defensive line. And with the new system, will they be that much better? Because it's not like they were awful name-wise last year, but it was bad. It was bad up front. It was bad on the back end. So they should be much better on the defensive line. And then I look at the secondary. They were getting torched last year, but they bring in Caleb Downs. That was their move, to just bring in a guy that is supposed to be a generational top safety prospect since Kyle Hamilton. Name your favorite safety prospect. As a plug-and-play safety, Caleb Downs, how much impact can he have on the back end here, where they were struggling last year, safety and corner?
Yeah. Look, if Caleb Downs is as good as he was in college or anything like it, that's a home run pick and a real difference maker to that defense. We've seen, just because safety is a quote-unquote lower value position, that doesn't mean they can't make a massive impact if you find a transcendent player. And we've seen that. Like, if you find an elite level guy, even if he's a safety, he can transform the back end of your defense. Downs has that potential. Now let's see if he can actually do it. That's the big variable in the back seven. Like, if he can be that guy going forward, that would be absolutely huge for them, and let a lot of those other guys kind of make plays off the back of that.
So I think the defensive line is in much better shape. At corner, it was interesting because when they were playing with under Dan Quinn, they were very turnover heavy and opportunistic on the defensive side of the ball. I remember Deron Bland had that monster season, which is always, it's tough to replicate the turnovers that you're forced. I still don't necessarily trust him, at corner. He had a rough season last year. They have Kobe Durant, second year of Siobhan Revel, and drafted Devin Moore, who I liked in the middle rounds. But again, it's a mid-round pick. So I don't know what cornerback looks like, and if Downs is good enough to overcome a lot of that as a guy. And I want to see how they deploy him, by the way. Does he play in and around the line of scrimmage? Does he just play a normal, free and strong safety role? But I think they're better there. They bring in D. Winters at linebacker. He was okay for the Niners, but for a fifth-round pick to just get a starting linebacker at a position that they needed a starter there. So they've got some speed on this side of the ball. They have a revamped defensive line. I think they're in this position where they just need to creep back toward average, very Bengals-like. Get back toward the middle of the pack. Don't give up 35-40 in these big games. And then I think Dallas can be better this year.
Mm-hmm.
Still not fully there on the defensive side of the ball, but I think they made steps in the right direction. Post-Parsons.
I think they are I think there are a lot of similarities to Cincinnati, right? Both teams you would expect to be battling for, as the best offense in the NFL. Both teams had underwhelming, if not bad, defenses, and both defenses look like they've taken significant steps in the right direction and just need to be average for the offense to be able to win the game for them.
Storyline-wise, because we didn't touch on the offense a ton, but George Pickens' season last year was incredible. Last year at this time, we would have been saying, "Oh, that's a really nice number 2 to CeeDee Lamb, who is your, CeeDee Lamb's a fringe top 5, top 7, like we're top 4 receiver in the NFL." Lamb wasn't as good last year, some inconsistency with his hands, but Pickens took over as the go-to guy. He was unstoppable on slants. I thought he just showed a more well-rounded game than he showed in Pittsburgh. He showed flashes in Pittsburgh, but most of his Steelers time was one-on-ones and one-handed catches and winning in contested situations. All of a sudden last year he's winning in the short game, winning after the catch, still winning down the field. Pickens has a chance to show that he could put together another big season, put the Cowboys in a situation where they got to make a call on him. Do you really want to pay him? But I think it's a good problem to have if you're Dallas with that 1-2 punch of Pickens and Lamb. That can go a long way for this team.
Yeah, and again, I think it's worth looking beyond those two guys and looking at the rest of the depth chart as well. Like obviously MVP/Super Bowl maker, MVS. But Flanoy is a really good player. Turpin is a really good player for what he does. Like he's a different type of receiver, but as one of the best return guys in the NFL, who then also has that gimmick role on offense, the speed, the end arounds, that kind of stuff. Like there aren't many teams that have all the boxes ticked that this team does. Plus, somehow they've got both Jonathan Mingo and Denzel Mims on the roster right now.
Oh, they just have all your favorite receivers.
All the guys that I like that stink are on this team.
That might be dated by the time the season rolls around.
Yeah, I don't know.
Honestly, their biggest weakness on offense, I think, is tackle. Terrence Steele is a few years removed from his best play, and Tyler Guyton, if he does win the job, just hasn't been good. 2 years in. Dallas is at 9.5 over under here. Where are you going to go?
What the hell? Let's go over.
Over. Cowboys fans, we're going over. Nobody watches the full show. Dallas over. This is your year.
It's got to be a team. I went under with Miami. I thought they would stink.
That's true. It's the optimism show here. All right, man. I got to tell you about our friends over at SeatGeek because they are my go-to when I need my Reds tickets. We got Paul Skeens coming to town. Pirates Reds this week. So got to give a huge shout out to SeatGeek, whether it's concerts, whether it's games, Reds tickets, Bengals tickets. As we talked about, we've been shut out of Bengals games as media. We're not allowed as media unless they let us sneak in this year. But I don't have my hopes up too high.
They have not been receptive to the Bugler.
They have not been. But that's why we go SeatGeek. That's where we get our Bengals tickets, our Reds tickets, concert tickets. Whatever you need. With over 35 million downloads, SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticketing app. There are more than 70,000 events listed on SeatGeek, including concerts, sports, festivals, and more. MLB's in full swing. College football starting back up. That's one of my favorite things to do, Sam. See who's coming in and around this 4-hour radius around Cincinnati. We can get to Chicago. We can get to Indianapolis. Get to Notre Dame. So you get college football tickets on SeatGeek. And, of course, the NFL, NBA, also right around the corner. So love using SeatGeek, and I will be using it to see Skeens this week.
Nice.
You should come see Skeens pitch for Pittsburgh.
Should I?
SeatGeek has your back, Sam. Each ticket's rated on a scale of 1 to 10, so you know you're getting a good deal. Look for the green dots. Green means good. Red means bad. Plus, every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee. So, of course, I got a code for you guys. You ready? You can use code Mike10 for 10% off your next set of tickets at SeatGeek. That's 10% off any tickets with promo code Mike10, MIC10. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app and have the code automatically added to your account so you can use it later. Thank you, SeatGeek, for everything that you do.
Nice.
All right, New York Giants are up next in the NFC East. A lot of turnover this offseason in New York. John Harbaugh comes in from the Baltimore Ravens. An intense courting process to get John Harbaugh to take the Giants job, including full personnel control. We got year 2 of Jackson Dart. We have Cam Scatteraboo doing backflips coming off of his Achilles. Exciting offseason here for the Giants.
It is. I mean, I do think the Harbaugh thing was a real coup for them. Like you said, I think the biggest part of the intense courtship that the Giants deployed there was, we're willing to relegate Joe Shane to a subordinate position if you will take the job. I think that was basically what it came down to. And they were willing to make that happen. And I think that was big to get Harbaugh in. I think it probably potentially also helps. Shane seems to have taken that reasonably, right? He's accepted it. There was speculation that they were going to fire him after the draft, but they didn't. They re-upped him, right? So he's sort of taken that, accepted that demotion, I guess, with decent grace. I think that might also be a good thing for him, right? Just let him do the personnel stuff, report up to Harbaugh and let him carry the can for what works and what doesn't. But look, Harbaugh's been one of the best coaches in the NFL in the last 15 years. So for a team like the Giants, who are not completely bereft of talent, like this was not a team that had zero talent, shouldn't be winning any games. They potentially found their quarterback of the future last year in Jackson Dart. There is some talent throughout this roster, albeit some of it injured and coming back and all those kinds of things. And now you just added a guy with a very good proven track record of not just A, being a coach, but also B, generally hiring well beneath him. Now, on paper, I'm not blown away by some of the hirings he's made so far, but, give the man his due. His track record is good.
I want to discuss that because it reminds me a little bit like in New England last year, they had Elliott Wolf as the de facto GM, but they brought in Mike Vrabel, who comes from a completely different line of thought. Elliott Wolf comes, his dad's Ron Wolf. It's the Packer system. Vrabel's got his own style, and it's like, how does this all work together? And they kind of made it work. You mentioned a lot that Harbaugh's worked with different types of people because a lot of times, a head coach comes in, it's like, well, I know this guy, guy, I worked with this guy, let's bring them all in. This is an interesting mishmash of people, right? So you have Joe Shane still running the scouting department, right? Even if he's not GM in title. So he's got Bill's ties and his history. You have Harbaugh coming from Baltimore where they did things a certain way. Denard Wilson as defensive coordinator who has Ravens ties. So there's at least some continuity there. But then you have Matt Nagy coming in as offensive coordinator. And it's like everybody in Kansas City thinks, well, he's the whole reason why the Chiefs' offense has taken a step back the last few years, and Bears fans are like, man, we had Nagy and whatever, but it's a different system. It's not like it's just an interesting mix because there's not continuity across all those three places. It doesn't mean it can or can't work or whatever. It's just something to keep an eye on. And like I mentioned with New England, it was eye-opening to me to figure out or to see like where that all fit together with Vrabel and Elliott Wolf, and it's worked. It's been fine. And then this could absolutely work. But it put some pressure, I think, on John Harbaugh to put it all together.
Yeah, you got Matt Nagy coming in as the offensive coordinator, which is an eyebrow-raising one. You've got Brian Callahan coming in as the pass game coordinator, the quarterback's coach as well. Sort of two former head coaches, which is always an interesting dynamic as well. But also, it's not like the Titans' offense was ever cooking with Brian Callahan there. And then Matt Nagy, as you said, is sort of blamed for a lot in the last few years. It's difficult to construct an argument that Matt Nagy would be a guy to go after, which doesn't mean he isn't, but those are two interesting hires for a guy, as I said, who in John Harbaugh has generally had a very good track record of hiring coordinators beneath him on both sides of the ball. But, last year you could argue that one of those hirings on the defensive side was the reason he got fired in the first place. So that's going to be a big variable in the success of Harbaugh going forward.
I don't want to get into it too much, but I think when you're looking at Nagy and Callahan, the argument against them is, well, both guys got their head coaching jobs because they were attached to an elite quarterback, right? Nagy with Mahomes and Callahan with Joe Burrow. What I would push back against is I think a lot of fans are like, well, hey, failed head coach, you only won 3 games a year. What can you teach us? What can you do? And I think that's a little overblown because, somebody has to lose in the NFL, right? The league's going to go 500. Somebody has to only win 3 or 4 games every year, but you probably got the job for a reason. Doesn't mean they can't be good in coordinator or support roles or whatever it might be. It was just fascinating to me to see. It wasn't like John Harbaugh just grabbed, hey, give me all the former Ravens coaches, let's go. Right. They're melding a lot of different systems and schools of thought and everything here. Jackson Dart is quarterback. I was so impressed with him last year. He's got to stay healthy. I know we've cited multiple concussions. He was checked for multiple concussions, only officially had 1, but it doesn't matter. The dude was running power and counter and lowering his head, playing like a maniac. I was so impressed with his running ability. Even in some games, he wasn't throwing the ball well at all, but still, keeping the Giants competitive. I was impressed with him overall, but much like other quarterbacks who have battled injuries, like he's just got to figure out his playing style. But I thought it was a very positive rookie season for Jackson Dart.
Yeah, it was, with that one caveat of like, can he protect himself enough to actually be of use long term? The official diagnosed concussion thing, I think, is something of a red herring in that particularly in game, like there's no real reliable way of testing for a concussion. This is just best guess, right? We need a protocol of some kind, like the guy's been hit in the head. Let's have a look at him. Let's run this little testing thing. That's close enough, sure. And if you pass or fail, doesn't necessarily mean you didn't have a concussion or not. The other thing is, it might not matter. Like all the research at the moment is sort of saying that it doesn't really matter necessarily about whether you had a concussion or not, because the subconcussive blow is maybe every bit as important. The whole point generally is the man's been hit in the head a lot for a guy who's a quarterback, and those guys can control that more than a lot of positions, right? So the running aspect of his game was really impressive and something that I don't think many people saw coming. Like when he first got in the lineup, it's like, why are they deploying this guy like Tim Tebow? That nobody looked at his college tape and thought that was who he was going to be, and yet it was. And it was a really important part of his game, but that comes with the concerns, right? Of, well, now you're deploying him like a running back, and he's not protecting himself. He's launching himself headfirst into a bunch of things. Can we find a balance here, right? Can we both tap into his running ability and protect him so that he can stay in the lineup as much as possible? That's the balancing act that they need to find this season.
Other storylines on the offensive side of the ball. Malik Neighbors, injured last year. He's coming back. Now, he's not on the PUP list right now. We'll see. Like, there was some lack of optimism about his potential return. I mean, when Neighbors is healthy, he looks like a true number one who can win at all levels of the field, win after the catch, and they need that. I think, going into the draft, we were wondering if they should have drafted a guy like Carnell Tate if he was available as a wide receiver 2. I think wide receiver 2 is still a big question mark. They got Malachi Fields in the third. They definitely added some physicality on both sides of the ball in the draft and some size. They're hoping maybe they get Darnell Mooney, 1 year, $3 million, to bounce back to where he was a couple years ago. So questions about Neighbors' health, questions about the receivers next to him, bringing Isaiah Likely as a nice pass-catching tight end, and then the 1-2 punch of Cam Scatterbo coming off of injury, and Tyrone Tracy. I like that as a backfield, assuming health for Scatterbo in particular. And then the other story that we talked about was, when they traded Dexter Lawrence for the number 10 overall pick, multiple ways that they could have gone. They go Francis Maui-Noa, the tackle/guard now out of Miami, and plugging Maui-Noa into Andrew Thomas at left tackle, Jermaine Illuminor, who comes back at right tackle, John Runyon, John Michael Schmitz. It's not a great offensive line, but if Maui-Noa's plug and play as a guard, like 3/5 feels pretty good, 3.5 out of 5 feels pretty good. It's like the best offensive line the Giants may have had in the last 8 or 10 years now.
Yeah.
It's been a while since they've had a good offensive line. I'm not saying it's great. It just might be the best they've had in a while.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, it's, can Maui-Noa plug and play and just be good right away? And then there's the second part of that, which is, what if he's what people like Mike Renner say, which is, what if he's an all-pro caliber guard? Like, what if he's a special guard but an okay tackle, and they're going to deploy him at guard? So not just he hits the ground running and he's good, but what if he's awesome, right? Then you've got Andrew Thomas, who's a top-tier left tackle. You've got Maui-Noa, who may be special, Illuminor, who's solid at right tackle, and then you just have those two potential issues at left guard and center, and try and figure out upgrades there along the way. But yeah, that's a big variable. The Malik Neighbors thing, I think, is just huge. Like we talked with Vic Troja, our injury expert, and how long it might take him to get back, and how much of an issue that might be. A fully healthy Malik Neighbors with that group of playmakers is pretty interesting and pretty exciting. A Malik Neighbors that misses some time at the start of the season, takes a little time to get back to where he was, and just generally is a work in progress, and suddenly the rest of that group has to do it by themselves, that's a lot more concerning.
Defensively, I think they've got an interesting group of players. So they go Arvell Reese with the 5th overall pick to add to a group that, now look, on paper last year, I was hyping this group. I was hyping this defensive line. Everybody knows about our Dexter Lawrence love. They had Dexter Lawrence. They had Brian Burns. They had first-round pick Abdul Carter. I was like, I don't care what else they have. That's right. And Kayvon Thibodeau. This looks like a great group. They got run over last year. We know Dexter was underwhelming relative to previous performance. It was not a good defense last year. This year's group, though, similar level of talent. Dexter Lawrence out. I want to talk about the defensive tackle group in a minute, but the hybrid type of players, Arvell Reese, the big question for him was he played mostly linebacker at Ohio State. He dabbled on the edge. A lot of teams projected him as an edge rusher. Is he going to be an early down linebacker? Probably, but he's got this pass rush potential and the ability to play a hybrid role. Abdul Carter was a hybrid player, went from linebacker to edge. In college, he looked like a really good pass rusher as a rookie. Didn't finish, but he was winning quickly. Number 1 in the NFL in quick win percentage. Brian Burns has been a really good pass rusher for them for a while as well. And as of record time, Kayvon Thibodeau still on the roster. They have depth and versatility at edge rusher, again, depending on how you classify Arvell Reese. And then you have Tremaine Edmonds for more size and length and just an interesting group of athletes, playmakers, and potential in the front seven here for the Giants.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to be so interested to see what they do with Arvell Reese. I as much as I think he'll be a very good linebacker, if that's what they do and they just say you're an off-the-ball linebacker, have fun, it will disappoint me as a waste of his talent, I think. Like, I would love to, because he was so good at both, I would love to see them carve some kind of hybrid role for him. I also think the way the NFL has gone, that's potentially more valuable and more achievable than it's ever been in the past because of how defenses have shifted and the way that they're combating what offenses do. I think we are ripe, we are primed for a unique athlete like Arvell Reese to come in and play a genuine hybrid role in a way that causes problems for offenses. So I would love to see the Giants turn him into some kind of genuine hybrid weapon. And I think that has the potential to completely change what this defense is. If, they just plug him in as a linebacker, okay, fine, we'll see what the rest of the defense looks like and how that works. If they use him a little bit more, basically as a hybrid player, like you're a 2-down linebacker and then you'll rush the passer a bit, or either you'll kick down into the defensive line or we'll just send you on the blitz every now and again. Again, fine, but it feels a little bit underwhelming in terms of what he could be. But, he's the big X factor in this entire defense because of how high he was drafted, because of what he could be potentially, and because of the number of things he could be.
And then I mentioned the defensive tackles. No one's going to take this defensive tackle group for the Giants and rank them among the league's best. I mean, if you were ranking them, they'd be among the league's worst. But I do think bringing into DJ Reader, who's slowed down a little bit these last couple of years, but still has a ton of potential, can hold the point, moves really well. Shelby Harris, again, over 10 years into his career, older, but just a quietly dependable player. Darius Alexander was a third-round pick last year. He's on the older side for a draft prospect. He underwhelmed as a rookie, but has potential there. It's not I don't hate the group. What I want to say is that I like the way they've built it up post Dexter Lawrence, right? So if you're going to sacrifice your defensive tackles to go get the 10th overall pick and put it towards your offensive line, buy low on Shelby Harris and DJ Reader to stitch it together is not the worst thing in the world. And then I would say the secondary is another group that just – it was kind of like the Dolphins last year, all underwhelmed last season. Javon Holland played the worst football of his career.
Yeah.
Paulson Adebo, Greg Newsome's in. Drew Phillips took a step back in his second year. They all got worse. So new system, Denard Wilson coming in, does that help fix things, right? Because it's a name-wise, these are players who have played good football at various points in their career. Thought they were going to be better, but this entire defense underachieved last year. So I think that I would say that bodes well for them to potentially bounce back this year.
Yeah, they feel like an overall defensive version of Miami's defensive line. Like, you looked at the group and you're like, they should not be this bad. Why are they underwhelming so much? Again, new coach, it feels like that's just an automatic bounce back spot. So, yeah, I think there's still a lot of talent there. Like Abdul Carter, Brian Burns, Arvell Reese, maybe TBD on what he'll be, but Tremaine Edmonds, the cornerback group, Tyler Nubin, Javon Holland, there's a lot of players that are good players. They shouldn't be as bad as they were a year ago.
Denard Wilson comes over from Tennessee, where they didn't really have a good pass rushers beyond Jeffrey Simmons, and I think he did a decent job putting it together. I think that's what I'm interested in to see here from the Giants. The versatility up front, the hybrid type of players, and underachieving players. on the back end. Now, is that enough in the NFC East? I think this is the worst team in the East, but I don't think the roster is completely devoid of talent. And if Dart can put together a full season and looks like he did last year, they'll be pretty competitive. Giants over/under 7.5 here. I think everybody in the East is going to be 7.5. This has got to be the worst in the East. Everybody will be 7.5 or higher. Could be the best division in football here.
It could be, yeah. I mean, look, I think
over
the Giants,
for everybody.
Right. I'm optimistic, or I was optimistic, that I think this Giants team could be better than people expect pretty quickly. Like, I think they could be good quite fast. But that was kind of before Vic gave us frights about what Malik Neighbors' knee, what condition that's going to be in, how long that's going to take. So I think a lot of it comes down to what condition he's in. If he's ready to go at the start of the season, I think this team could be good fast. If Malik Neighbors is going to take some time, like outside of him, that group is rough. With him there, that group's fine.
Over, though. Going over on everybody in the show.
Yeah.
For the Giants. Who's next? Philadelphia Eagles are next. Oh, fun offseason for the Eagles. We got a whole new offense. Again, Sean Mannion comes in as offensive coordinator. A.J. Brown out and traded. We got a committee approach replacing him. Jalen Hurts back at quarterback, becoming like all these other quarterbacks. Hot button discussions around the quarterback, Jalen Hurts. The Philadelphia Eagles, over the last 4 years, have either been to or won the Super Bowl or lost in the wild card round. That has been the Eagles. So they are due. It's an even year. They're due to go back to the Super Bowl in Philadelphia, 2022, 24, and now 26. Howie Roseman, often seen as top 1 to 3 general managers in the NFL. I think it's another, still very good roster, but O-line that couldn't run the ball last year, couldn't back up Saquon Barkley's 2,000-yard season. What are we looking for the Eagles this year?
Yeah, the offensive line is definitely going to be an interesting thing. The line coupled with the Saquon Barkley thing, like how does that run game work? But honestly, the big thing has been this offseason storyline of the Jalen Hurts discussion and the way they've approached that in trading away A.J. Brown eventually, replacing him, if you like, with a collection of players that operate in different areas to A.J. Brown, right? So they didn't trade away A.J. Brown and then go out and get a ready-made replacement to occupy the same role, the same deployment, the same snaps. They traded him away and brought in a bunch of players that play the game completely differently in different areas. And this has been coordinated with this sort of period of Jalen Hurts, discussion about whether he targets the middle of the field, how to get the best out of him, all this kind of stuff. So it really does seem like a concerted effort, Sean Mannion at offense coordinator now, to be like, all right, there's a blind spot to your game effectively. We're going to change that this year. Like, you are going to target this area of the field, and we are convinced that will make you the best version of yourself. Doesn't mean they're right, though. And if they're not, this could blow up.
It's worth having a condensed version of this discussion that we've had a few times this offseason, though, right? I always describe the quarterback as the poetic license to morph the offense into his own style, which is why when you watch the Eagles over the last few years, whether it's Kellen Moore, Shane Steichen, doesn't matter who it is. It looks similar at times, right? And last year in particular, it was the disappearing act that the offense had was mind-blowing, right? They'd have a great half and then go 3 and out 5 straight times. Or they'd just go 3 and out 5 times to start a game and then all of a sudden just, put 2 touchdowns on the board. It was unbelievable how inconsistent they were. Looked great at times and just completely disappeared. But I think the offense has always morphed into what Jalen Hurts does and likes. He likes ISO routes on the outside. Now, again, can you find passes where he throws the ball over the middle of the field? Absolutely. He just doesn't do it as often as everyone else.
Yeah.
Right? And so I do believe they're trying to make a move to say, okay, to take the next step as an offense, we need to explore all options. And part of this has been forced upon them because I think they knew A.J. Brown would no longer be a part of this offense. You don't have maybe the very best outside the numbers one-on-one winner in the NFL any longer. You don't have A.J. Brown anymore. So replace him in the aggregate. Dontavian Wicks comes in. Marquise Brown is in. And then the 2 guys that they get in the draft, Mekhi Lemon and Eli Stowers. Maybe nobody better than attacking the middle of the field than Mekhi Lemon out of the slot, and then Stowers as a big target in the middle of the field, more of a big slot type of player. So this will be a fun story to watch. Just because a quarterback hasn't done it before doesn't mean he can't.
Yeah.
Right? But we also have multiple years of, hey, this is how the offense has looked. Is there? I don't want to use the word stubbornness to it, but does Jalen Hurts want to adapt here? Right? And so what does this offense look like? And then that's only half the story, because like I said earlier, the run game disappeared last year. You would still rank this Eagles offensive line among the league's best. Jordan Mailata is awesome at left tackle. Lane Johnson still might be, top 3 right tackle even as he gets older. Landon Dickerson, when he's healthy at guard. Cam Jurgens is fine at center. Like, it's still a very good offensive line, but they couldn't run the ball. They were not effective staying on schedule last year. That also needs to improve this year. It's not just a Jalen Hurts thing. And Barkley, he was okay. Like, he wasn't bad last year. He was okay, but he certainly wasn't what he was in 2024, where every little crease that he had, boom, was a 60-yard touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult balancing act with the Jalen Hurts thing because, on the one hand, you've got stories like Aaron Rodgers under LaFleur. Like, when you force a quarterback into uncomfortable situations because you know better than they do what will get the best version out of them, you can get an elite player. You can get the best possible. You get MVP. You got multiple MVP seasons out of Rodgers following a time where he had sort of fallen into this rut, because from this outside perspective, you could see more clearly this will cause defenses more problems. I know you don't like doing it, but this makes you play better. This makes you produce better. But there's also going to be countless situations where you take a guy and force him to do stuff he doesn't like or do well, and that doesn't work, right? Because he doesn't like or do those things well. And so I think that's probably a difficult thing. Multiple years now, I don't know that it's probably not a rash decision they've taken, in that they've looked at multiple years of this offense effectively falling into the same rut and concluded, all right, look, I understand we've had a lot of success here, but the fact that this keeps happening is a problem. We're going to make a concerted effort to force you into a different modality and see if that works. Again, I think the problem is just the risk associated with that, and be like, look, this might get the best version of Jalen Hurts that there is. And when you add his rushing threat, his big playability, the best version of Jalen Hurts is a spectacular quarterback. And if they're able to find that and tap into it on a regular basis, and the talent is there for that to work, right, as a system. Devontae Smith is a really good receiver. Obviously, Saquon Barkley, the tight ends, the additions of Mekhi Lemon, Eli Stowers, TBD on how long it takes them to get cooking. But these are guys that should be able to make that style of offense work really well. But if Hurts just doesn't like and can't do that at a high level, and then there's a reason he always defaults back to that kind of ISO, when in doubt, chuck it one-on-one down the sideline, then this offense is kind of setting itself up to be the worst version of themselves.
To play both sides again, to be clear, we can say that there's growth to be had in Hurts' game. And by the way, he's won a lot of football games. Yeah. Yes, he had 2 awesome Super Bowls against the Chiefs and played well. His running ability is such a huge part of what they're able to do offensively. I think that's a big part of why Saquon was able to go for 2,000 yards. I do think there's something to QB wins more than most of the analytical community. And if you look at Hurts across Alabama and Oklahoma and Philadelphia, always finds a way to win more often than not. Yes, he's been on some really good teams, but I don't think that's completely unrelated. So there's been a lot of good. They're just trying to unlock more.
Yeah.
And look, you have to. Like, disappearing act last year. Week after week, the offense had to get better. By the way, I don't know that Sean Mannion was necessarily their first choice of offensive coordinator last year. They went through a long hiring process. That's the other interesting note. It's not like they were like, hey, we need the Packer system. Go get Mannion. Let's go. It's where they landed. But either way, I do think they wanted somebody to come in and get the most out of Hurts in this offense, of course. Defensively, I think they're loaded again. Like a trade for Jonathan Grenard to just continue to replenish the pass rush situation. They re-upped Jordan Davis at defensive tackle. Jalen Carter's still there, not re-upped yet. He's been a little bit more inconsistent in the run game, but still extremely disruptive. Moro Ajomo up front, very disruptive. He's been a really good player. Jalix Hunt. They bring in Arnold Ebiketie, who I think is one of the best third edge rushers in the league. Nolan Smith is still there, right? So my preview for the Eagles every year is listing their 8 defensive linemen and saying, this is a good group. Well, it's a good group. Again, I just listed like 7 of them. So they'll be good up front. Quinyon Mitchell's become one of the best corners in the league. I think one of the interesting stories for the Eagles the last couple of years is how they spent they spent a lot of picks on the back 7. The 2 corners, Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, and then the following year, Jahad Campbell at linebacker, and Andrew Makuba at safety. For a team that loves to build in the trenches through the draft, they added a ton of youth to this back 7. I think they've reloaded there as well. Campbell, I think, is poised to become one of the best linebackers in the league. And I think it was a sneaky good move to bring in Reek Woolen at corner opposite Quinyon Mitchell. That dude is still long and fast and moves well. And I know he lost his cool a time or two last year with Seattle, and he got benched, and Seattle fans are like, good riddance. But, man, he can lock it down on the outside as well and, play feisty coverage with good size. So I think the Eagles are looking like a top 5 defense once again with Vic Fangio calling the shots.
Yeah, front 7 I think is really good. I have a little bit of a concern at the safety position. Makuba is potentially solid, but I kind of want to see how that group deploy. I mean, they drafted
Cooper's going to play base safety, I guess.
Right,
is what they're talking about.
But
you still need a safety in nickel when he drops down to cover the slot.
Yeah, which will still be, let's say 50% of your snaps. So how that group deploys will be interesting. They drafted a safety in Cole Wisniewski as well, so we'll see. But that's a potential weak spot on the defense that doesn't exist otherwise.
Wisniewski, who you mentioned, one of my favorite late round sleepers in the draft, as well as Keyshawn James Newby, pass rusher out of New Mexico via Idaho. They got 2 of my favorite late round sleepers there, so keep an eye on them in the preseason and beyond here. How he does it again.
New Mexico via Idaho.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. The Power 4 schools should have been on Keyshawn James. KJN, I call him.
It's not a well-trodden pipeline.
No, you'll see. You'll know his name. He's going to have a James Houston-like impact. James Houston, 7 sacks and like 100 rushes. You watch. So look, I think the Eagles look good again defensively. I've said this about the Lions and some of the other top teams. I don't know if you would stack this team next to maybe their 24 team and say, yeah, it's better. I think it's tough to maintain straight dominance at every position group from a team building perspective. But to Howie's credit, even when they've rebuilt a little bit after Super Bowl wins or Super Bowl appearances, it's not a big drop off, right? There's a good balance of winning through the draft and then trading a third for Jonathan Grenard at this point to add him to just a 4-man rotation on the edge. I think they look really good on this side of the ball again. I think the East is going to be competitive, man.
Yeah.
I think the Cowboys are better.
Mm-hmm.
Eagles are still good, and we're still going to talk Commanders here. Over under 10.5 for the Eagles. The big question, I think it's going to be Hurts in the pass game. If they can come alive, we'll determine this.
It really
this
is.
Total.
It's always reductive to be like quarterback how they play, but it really is going to come down to how does this what looks like a concerted, conscious experiment to like shift Jalen Hurts towards a different mode of playing. How does that work, right? If that goes well, this team could be the best team in the NFC. If that doesn't go well, like if they just force Jalen Hurts into the things he doesn't like doing, and it goes badly, I mean, this could be the worst version of the Eagles we've seen since he got there.
Even year over for the Eagles.
So it's going to work.
The Brett Saberhagen of NFL football teams. The San Francisco Giants, even year, Eagles over. Wrapping up the NFC East with the Washington Commanders. I think at one point we were ranking off seasons, and I think we had the Commanders near the top. Big overhaul on the defensive side of the ball. You have David Blau coming in as offensive coordinator. Year 3 for head coach Dan Quinn, and year 3 for quarterback Jaden Daniels. What are we expecting here for Washington this season?
Yeah, kind of interested to see the David Blau, Jaden Daniels combination. Blau's being talked about as one of those, the next superstar young offensive mind kind of guys. So that's an interesting combination.
I always wonder if that's because of Blau or because he's moved quickly through the ranks. Yeah. But is it because he's attached to Ben Johnson?
I mean, it can't hurt, but those are probably related, right? The fact that Ben Johnson has identified him as that guy, and he's being talked about as that. Like if he's able to do that, Jaden Daniels already shown he can be a spectacular quarterback. Now coming off this year where he's been banged up, like what can those two produce together would be a pretty interesting combination. The other variable is, everyone keeps talking about we're all waiting for like a second shoe to drop in terms of like, where's the extra receiver coming from, right? For most of the offseason, people thought it would be Brandon Ayuk, and then the longer he does Instagram videos, the more unlikely that seems. But
he's just going to show up at practice, though.
Matt Harmon was saying that? He's like, there's a non-zero chance that like when camp opens, Brandon Ayuk's just like there. All right, I'm ready. It's just like, dude, you're still under contract with the 49ers. So you can't be here. Yeah, I mean, dude, the Brandon Ayuk. Anyway, but I think Stephon Diggs was out here the other day saying he'd be interested in a number 2 role opposite Terry McLaurin. I know they drafted Antonio Williams as well, but like right now this is a receiving core that's Terry McLaurin, some other players, and like this glaring hole at wide receiver 2, and we're kind of waiting to see who fills that, if anybody.
It feels like the perfect fit for Stephon Diggs, doesn't
it? Really
it?
Does. Like, I did think that the Brandon Ayuk thing made a lot of sense as a buy low. If anyone's going to get him playing at that level, maybe it's a short-term thing, but reunite him with Jaden Daniels, reunite him with, but like, dude, his Instagram stuff is just like straight crazy.
I want to be cautious about this because a lot of people, like these season previews are going to live for about a month leading into the season. As of record time, Stephon Diggs is unsigned and Ayuk is still on Instagram doing whatever he's doing. But Diggs does feel like the perfect fit in football, ultimate team game, and the whole deal. But sometimes one player makes a massive impact. Diggs is the perfect complement to Terry McLaurin on the other side. So we'll see if that ends up materializing. But I think they need somebody, right? You can't just depend on De'Ami Brown returning or Van Jefferson or Traylon Burks did some cool stuff, one-handed catch. And
one cool thing.
Maybe 2 good catches last year. That's not enough.
No,
I'm intrigued by Burks as a 3 or 4 because the injuries and inconsistency with him, but you need a legitimate 2 to go with Terry McLaurin, who's awesome.
You could talk yourself into Antonio Williams hitting the ground running as a rookie, and maybe he's that guy right out of the box. Maybe Jalen Lane is somebody that could take a huge step forward going into this year. Like, you could kind of paint a picture that somebody emerges as that role, but it doesn't seem massively likely.
But they both have specific roles. Like Lane's a speed guy, and Williams can be inside, outside, just get open. He's not great at anything. You need a 2.
I mean, but one of those guys could become the 2. You just feel a lot better about it if you weren't relying on that, which is the thing.
Then the big question is going to be Jaden Daniels, right? He missed a lot of time last year due to injury. He missed some time as a rookie. That's always been a factor. We talked about it with Dart. We're talking about it with Lamar. We're talking about it with Burrow. If you're consistently out of the lineup, and consistently means, multiple seasons in a row or whatever it may be, you figure out how do you protect yourself. There's reports that they're going to be under center more. The new trend in the NFL is taking snaps under center. Old school. When you're under center as the quarterback, you take away the QB run game, essentially, right? Other than like naked boots. So that does limit the offense a little bit because Jaden Daniels' running ability is outstanding. That helps win the math, frees up the offensive line, don't have to block as many people, frees up running backs. So they got to find what that balance is as far as under center versus shotgun. But if Daniels gets back to he had one of the better rookie seasons we've seen in the last 10, 15 years among quarterbacks. So if he can get back to that, Washington's immediately a contender.
Yeah, I think the big thing, it's going to be like the Jackson Dart conversation. Like, what is the balance between using Jaden Daniels' athleticism, his rushing ability, his scrambling ability, and protecting him, right? Like, you've got to thread that needle. Any team that has an athletic quarterback has got to deal with this. Either the guy's got to be bulletproof or he has to protect himself. And doing that at the same time as tapping into his athleticism is not an easy thing to do. And it's it's a difficult thing that everyone's got to work with. Daniels now, because A, he has the self-preservation instincts of a crash test dummy, and B, you've already seen multiple instances of him being injured now. There's no way you can go into the season and not be scared by that. If you're a Washington fan, you can't be blithely like, it's all fine. I had no concerns whatsoever, right? It's got to terrify you. And so, you need whether it's David Blau, whether it's Jaden Daniels taking it upon himself, like somebody needs to figure out how we adjust this.
O-line wise, I think they're middle of the pack-ish, right? Laramie Tunsil at left tackle, Sam Cosmi at right guard, the two most dependable players. Josh Carnley heading into year 2, I think he'll be fine. Brandon Coleman, they do have to replace Tyler Biotish at center. I think, if they had him back, I would feel a little bit better, I think. But I think they'll be fine, O-line wise. My big question's wide receiver 2. And then running back, adding Rashad White to Bill, Ja'Cory Krosky, Merritt, nice 1-2 punch there as well. And, of course, the great ageless Jeremy McNichols is still there. The story in Washington, though, beyond Daniels' health, the new offense, it's the defense, man. I mean, 2 years ago, they had a lot of sacks. I think they overachieved defensively. They were not a disruptive front seven despite the sack totals. I think they have a chance to be a much more disruptive front seven with Adafe Owe coming in, Caleb Chason, Dietrich Wise, Tim Settle returning, and then they go Sonny Styles with the 7th overall pick at linebacker. I think this front seven, and Leo Chanel, one of the most underrated, just good, solid, dependable linebackers in the NFL. I think it is maybe the most improved front seven in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those teams where they just added so much that it's easy to like a lot of what they did.
List players like I did, and then it's like, oh, this is good.
Because just through sheer volume, you're going to like a lot of what they did. But part of that is they needed a lot of help. Like, so much of this is, what are they going to get out of some of the players that are already in situ and going to be, getting extended playing time? Like, they paid Daron Payne a ton of money, and he's never justified that from that moment on. They drafted Johnny Newton pretty high. He's yet to show up and make that kind of impact.
Javon Kinlaw.
Yeah, like they just need Newton in particular. Like, I've kind of written off the idea that Daron Payne's going to play up to that level, and we're just working out, playing out his contract before they move on. Tim Settle comes in, can potentially replace him long term. But like, Newton's the guy that they really need to make that kind of impact as a penetrating, pass rushing type of interior lineman. Really didn't show much of that last year. I was surprised how little impact he made. They really need him to take a step forward.
So I think they're better up front. Defensive tackles.
The edge spot is a lot better.
Edge is much improved. Defensive tackle, there's still some potential there, but like you said, you're waiting on a Newton or a Payne to get back to where he was or whatever it may be. The secondary is still going to be the bigger question for me, right? They took a shot on Marshawn Lattimore, found out he was aging and too old. Second rounder Trey Amos had some ups and downs as a rookie. Mike Sanders had his ups and downs in 2 years. They bring in Amik Robertson, Akilla Witherspoon. Like, they're trying to stitch it together with some players that have started in the past. Nick Cross comes in to add some speed at safety, but I've got some questions about the back seven. But a Dan Quinn defense, when he was at his best in Dallas, it was the pass rush getting after it, kind of like with Parsons and the Packers, right? Like, if the pass rush is getting after it well enough, you can, have an opportunistic back seven and try to force some turnovers. I think that's their best bet, because I don't know if they're holding up. If the pass rush doesn't get home, I think they're in trouble, like any back seven, but maybe more than others. But have some questions about the secondary versus some other teams.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's still, you feel better about it, I think, than a year ago, but it is still a potential big weak area.
That's the weakness, and I think it just, on paper, that's the weakness. I think Amos could be a really good player. Sanders still could be a good player. They just haven't done it consistently in the NFL. But I think maybe more than any other team in this division or in the conference, relying on that pass rush to protect those guys.
Right.
But yeah, I think they're improved quite a bit on that side of the ball. The front seven was not good last year. I think they overachieved 2 years ago, and I think they've at least put the resources in the right place to get back on track. Dan Quinn, too, overall, just him as a head coach, I've been impressed. He had a good run at Atlanta, and when he went to Dallas as defensive coordinator, I was very impressed, because remember, he was running that Seattle cover three, very, very simple defense, but they did a lot of the same stuff over and over again. He evolved in Dallas, advanced what he was doing defensively, brought that into year one in Washington, and then Daniels gets hurt last year, and you didn't really get to see the Commanders fully. So I think my point with Quinn is I think he's shown the ability to grow as a defensive coach and as a head coach. I thought he did a really nice job with his fourth down decisions were a big part of what led them to the NFC Championship 2 years ago. I think Quinn's in that mix for he could be, in the top, consistent top 10 coach in the NFL, and that shouldn't be overlooked with what they have here.
Right.
All right, man. Over under only 7.5 for the Commanders. Them and the Giants with the same over under. Surprised by that?
No, not really. I'm definitely more optimistic on the Giants than I am with Washington, though. Even though you would have more confidence in Jaden Daniels as the quarterback. Similar sort of needle to thread in terms of the balancing act between protecting him and using them as a rusher. But I'm going to go with under for Washington.
Come on, dude. We're going over on everybody.
No,
Let's
not
go.
everybody. Almost everybody.
Over. Commanders. Everybody. For the Commanders fans tuning in just to hear it. Good stuff, man. We made it through the Easts in record time. Halfway through the league here. 2 days in.
Yeah.
Remember, we're going all 4 days here. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 9 a.m.
Easy.
North yesterday, East today, tomorrow. Where are we going? West, probably? We always do the South last.
Poor South.
Sorry, guys. I'll say this. I think as I talked through the NFC East, the NFC West is probably the best division in football because of the top three there. I think the East has a chance to contend. I think the Norths came back down to earth a little bit this year. Was it last year and the year before they felt really strong? I think the Norths come back down to earth a little bit, and the NFC East going to be a good division this year.
Yeah, I mean the NFC North might be very good in terms of all four teams could be pretty good. There's no Arizona,
Yeah.
But
yeah, they've got good depth there.
Yeah, and to be fair, any of the four could be a playoff team from that kind of perspective. So they may have a sort of higher average baseline just because there's not one team dragging it down. But yeah, there are the NFC West with three teams that could legitimately be playoff contenders, and the Cardinals,
Super Bowl contenders in the West,
legit contenders.
The East is if John Harbaugh raises the floor in Washington, you get a full year of Jaden healthy. I mean they're all 500 or better potentially in this division. So, All right, man, good stuff today. Appreciate everybody for being here. Remember, hit us up with some ideas for the Wednesday shows during the season. Check the mic at the33rdteam.com. We're trying to get to 100,000 subscribers.
Yeah, what are we at now? 87.5K.
Yeah. So we have about a month here.
And if
about
we
a month.
When we get there, I can do a show in this Uncle Sam jumpsuit thing.
Yes. Come on. This is motivation enough to get us to 100,000 here.
And I don't have a hat. I do have a sweatband and some sunglasses.
Someone
and
send
stuff.
Sam a hat. Send a nice hat. We'll email us. We'll give you the address.
What Uncle Sam, the guy from the posters, wears a giant top hat.
We need a big top
I get
hat.
one of those.
We need an American top hat. We need something like that. So, and you're allowed to do that now because you're officially a citizen and you're just showing support for the country.
God, I got to get the passport. I still haven't done that.
Yeah, go do that before they deny you that.
I don't think they can deny it to me, but it means I can't leave the country and get back in until I do that.
All right, man. Good stuff today. Appreciate everybody for being here, and we'll see you again tomorrow, 9 a.m. More. Check the mic.